This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm not sure that you're taking this as seriously as I require. Neil, for example, says, if I was Rishi, I would pack my bags now and go and catch up on all the Sky TV I missed out on as a child growing up in poverty. That's from Neil in Doncaster. Where would you start? Probably with The Simpsons. Mohit writes, if I was Rishi Sunak, I'd wipe my tears on £50 notes and then ride off into the sunset to spend more time with my money on a £100 million yacht. I don't think I'd be sad for too long. Nikki says, you can put me straight in Idiot's Corner if you want. I perish the thought. But if I was Rishi Sunak, I'd say that we're going to re-enter the single market because Brexit has been such a terrible mistake and we need to start undoing the damage done to the country economically, socially and politically. I have never voted Conservative in my life, but if he did that, he'd have my vote. What's the opposite of Idiot's Corner, Nikki? The genius paddock? I don't know. But anyway, you're in it. I asked this question seriously, and I can predict some of the funny answers. But if you're going to ring in, you have to be coming out with plausible policy positions. Oh, that's an agreeable alliteration, isn't it? At 4 minutes after 10 on Monday. But plausible policy positions, please. Plausible policy positions, please. Peter Piper picked a pickled plausible policy position. Because my eye was caught first thing this morning by the front page of the Times, which essentially reports that smear Keir is about to become government policy, or at least that ministers who have spoken to the Times are urging Rishi Sunak to adopt smear Keir as the sort of last roll of the dice in this election campaign. You can never say never. You really can't. But if the gap was going to narrow, I think it would have narrowed by now. So barring some sort of act of God or some sort of extraordinary event, the game seems to be almost up, doesn't it? Grant Shapps talking again this morning in terms that accept defeat and try to frame the conversation as minimising the size of the Labour majority. They've introduced a meaningless word into the British political lexicon, supermajority, which has a substantive meaning in American politics, but means absolutely nothing in this country. So now they're trying to spook the horses by warning that Labour's victory is going to be too big. I don't really get that tactic. I don't know quite how they imagine people responding to that. If people were going to be spooked by a big Labour majority, they'd be spooked by a big Labour majority. I don't think there's a point at which you become spooked according to the size of the majority. You may disagree. That's how the programme works. But I don't quite go, oh, yes, 80-seat majority, that'd be great. But 150, oh, no, I'm changing my vote as a consequence. I just don't get it. Do you get it? I don't get it. But here's the thing. We flirted last week. What day was it last week? Where we flirted with the idea of beginning to be in danger of beginning to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. I'm delighted to report that danger passed. I don't think there's any prospect of me ever feeling sorry for the fella, except in the most sort of fundamental human way. Just as in you would, if you were watching someone being pecked to death by crows, you'd feel sorry for them even if you hated their guts, even if it was your sworn enemy. Well, I would anyway. Maybe you're a bit more sadistic than me, or a bit more given to Schadenfreude. The point here is that they don't know what to do. They haven't got a clue. All of the traditional tactics have failed. The screaming and cheerleading of the client media has done absolutely nothing to nudge the needle. Even the sensible voices now are talking in apocalyptic terms. Those of us who have sort of held back from hyperbole or waited for the Ming vase to shatter into a million pieces as Keir Starmer tries to shepherd it across the ice rink or the polished dance floor, whatever metaphor you preserve. It seems to me to be all over bar the shouting when I look at the sort of commentary at, and when I look at the right-wing media. If you want a mark of how mad things have become, the Daily Telegraph is now warning that everyone's going to have to emigrate to get away from the Labour Party. They're going to be absolutely gutted when they find out that we've abolished freedom of movement. And also that the prospect of being an economic migrant for Daily Telegraph writers is absolutely fine if you're white and British, but absolutely unacceptable if you're neither. But anyway, those are the riddles and the wrestling matches that the right-wing media are going to have to deal with. So what I find extraordinary is the idea, I based this story here, the idea that the Tories have looked at their current performance, their current polling. They've looked at where Rishi Sunak stands or sits on the political spectrum, on the voting spectrum. And do you know what they've decided? They've decided that they're being too nice, that the public think they're too nice. Suella Braverman has sort of signed up to this idea that they haven't been nasty enough. They haven't been close enough to the bile that Farage peddles every day. No prizes for guessing which party lost a candidate last night over support for the British National Party. But the idea that they haven't moved far enough to the right, on the one hand, and then on the personal level, that they haven't been nasty enough about Keir Starmer. So that's where they are now. Rishi Sunak, I'm reading, is being urged by cabinet ministers and senior Tories to go for the jugular and launch more direct personal attacks against Sir Keir Starmer. So the areas in which they think he could be attacked are claiming that he wants to rejoin the single market or reintroduce free movement. Their source added, he will sign a deal with the French. He will undo Brexit. He will rip apart our institutions. The guy's a socialist, and there's a real chance people will give him a free rein if they back reform, which, of course, the Tories are terrified of. Labour has said that it won't rejoin the single market or reintroduce free movement if it wins the election. But still, the idea that they're going to hit Keir Starmer with personality politics says to me that they're possibly even more desperate than we noticed, than we realised. One cabinet minister told The Times, Rishi is a really nice and deeply honourable guy. I'm not sure whether he is uncomfortable instinctively with the personalised attacks, but it has been more generalised so far. So they want Sunak to target Starmer over, wait for it, his support for Jeremy Corbyn, who is, of course, no longer in the Labour Party, as a direct consequence of Keir Starmer's leadership and Jeremy Corbyn's conduct. His decision to campaign for a second referendum on Brexit, just as the opinion polls reflect the fact that the British public is absolutely persuaded that Brexit was a disaster or is a disaster, and his work as a human rights lawyer, which involves misleading the public into thinking that lawyers have a great amount of agency over what cases they take and don't take. And so all three of those attack lines seem to me to be desperate. But I could be wrong. So here is your question. Here is your first question of the week as the election looms ever closer. And we'll be looking today at your final opportunities to get signed up, to get registered to vote, something which is, I would argue, of absolutely paramount importance. What would you do? What would you do? If you were in charge of the Conservative election campaign, if you were Rishi Sunak, what would you do now? What might, in your view, limit the losses? Or even if your glass is more than half full, deliver an unexpected victory, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. What would you actually do? Because I'm not sure I'd know where to start. I'm pretty sure that lurching further to the right is absolutely disastrous behaviour. And every time you try to appease that kind of nativist snarl, the nativist snarl will just get louder. It's extraordinary how little they've learned about the consequences of letting racist liars into the heart of public discourse to tell their racist lies and then try to appease some of the people responding to the racist lies by talking about deporting asylum seekers or leaving the European Union or whatever it may be. This idea that you can somehow snuff out racist lies by trying to woo the people that have fallen for the racist lies is categorically disastrous. It's actually a road to fascism, as history has taught us a million times. But if you think that's wrong, or you can explain to me how chasing the same voters that are sort of tempted by Farage's bile, then that might work. Or is there any way to stop? I would have thought that logic dictated, especially now that you're in an election campaign period and you don't have to be held hostage by the right of your own party. This is actually just about getting voters. I would have thought that the obvious play would be to move in the other direction and try to woo some people back to the Tory fold who are currently intending not to vote for them, but who might conceivably have voted for them in the past. So what on earth would you do in policy terms or in campaigning terms? Where do you think Keir Starmer, or indeed the Labour front bench, where are they vulnerable? They tried to go after Angela Rayner because of her housing arrangements from 15 years ago, and that, as everybody knew, that was as damp a squib as the curry that Keir Starmer had in Durham. I wonder if that's part of their problem. I wonder if because I presume that you don't actually immerse yourself in the client media every morning. You just rely upon me to give you a quick heads up on what's going on. If that sounds a little immodest, I apologise. But according to the Press Gazette, I'm the most influential journalist in the country at the moment. So I'll allow myself a little moment of suggesting that perhaps you rely on me for knowing what the right-wing media is doing, what the client journalists are pretending. But if you follow these clowns on social media, or if you read the bills that they churn out in the Telegraph and the Mail and the Sun and the Express, maybe they believe it. Maybe all the people surrounding Rishi Sunak thought that Angela Rayner's Council House or Keir Starmer's curry were actually massive zingers and were actually going to be, hugely significant vote swingers. Maybe they're sitting there thinking, but hang on a minute, we've attacked him for being a lawyer. We've attacked him for actually doing some legal work when he was actually a legal worker, and it just isn't working. And maybe they believe this. They actually think, well, what we'll do, we'll keep clobbering him with Jeremy Corbyn and hope that nobody's noticed Jeremy Corbyn is not in the Labour Party anymore. I mean, do you see what I mean? If you're trying to work out how they could have ended up in such a mess, the answer might be that they have got high on their own supply. Well, that works. I do like that phrase. They've got high on their own supply, haven't they? So you look at a Braverman or a Badenoch, and they are not trying to cannibalise the reform vote. They are, in a sense, reform voters, especially Braverman, with dreaming of deporting people. So they are actually creatures of the client media, not just beneficiaries of it. They're creatures created by it. They are every bit as signed up to the nonsense that Brexit is going well, or the nonsense that we can somehow survive as an economy without workers coming in at a rate of not. All of this, they actually believe it. They actually believe it. But Sunak doesn't, and he doesn't have to be held hostage by these people. So what would you do now? How many days away is the election? So is it a fortnight on Thursday? I think it's probably a fortnight on Thursday, isn't it? So you've got 2.5 weeks. I don't know why my voice went weird then. It sounded like I was selling goods. 2.5 weeks. Roll up. 2.5 weeks. You've got 2.5 weeks in which to turn this election around. You are Rishi Sunak. What are you going to do? Okay? I think that's a lovely opener for our week together. So hit the numbers now. You will get through. You've got 2.5 weeks to turn it around, or to at least nibble away at the imminent Labour majority. According to all the polls, never say never, but you've got 2.5 weeks to turn things around, at least a bit, ideally a lot. What would you do? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. You are Rishi Sunak. You're staring electoral oblivion in the face. You're about to go down in history as the most unsuccessful party leader of the post-war period. What are you going to do to avoid that grisly fate? All right? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 10, and I think I know where we're going to be at 11 o'clock. Well, I'm going to be here, but I mean sort of in terms of conversationally, I think at 11 o'clock, if we haven't realised it already, then we are probably going to conclude that there's nothing they can do, really. The direction of traffic now is pretty much guaranteed, unless, as I say, something truly extraordinary happens. It's 20 minutes after 10. What would you do now, staring electoral wipeout squarely in the face? What would you do if you were Rishi Sunak? Let's start in Alicante. Ben's there. Ben, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. Thank you so much for taking my call. I think he actually can retrieve something. He can retrieve some dignity from this by simply rejecting. Because I do think he's a decent man. I genuinely believe this guy's a decent guy.
Why do you think that?
Yes, I do.
Why do you think that? Because some of the things he's done and some of the things he's said are actually pretty grim. But because he does it in a sort of managerial manner, we don't think of him as being grim. But what is it you like that you've seen that makes you think he's a decent man?
I saw an interview with him which really hit me hard and struck me hard, where he was talking about racism and the racism that he'd experienced as a young man.
Yes.
And he said it's the pain that never stops. And I thought to myself, this is someone who clearly can. I mean, I listen to all your shows.
But being a victim of racism doesn't... I mean, it means we should have sympathy, but it doesn't prove that he's a nice person.
It doesn't necessarily prove that he's a nice person, but I do think he wants
He's still got
to
15 million
be a
quid
good
of
guy.
Frank Hester's money in the Conservative bank account, and Frank Hester's racist abuse of Diane Abbott was off the charts.
James, this is absolutely true. But I do genuinely believe that if he were to turn around to reform now and just say, we absolutely reject these terrible ideas, in the way that I think I saw Michael Heseltine doing this the other day. I think that lots of genuinely decent Conservatives reject these terrible ideas. Then I think he could exit politics with real dignity, and we could look back at him as a person that tried his best.
But you're focusing on his personal reputation legacy, aren't you? Because doing what you've just described, you don't. Are you saying that you think that would win votes?
I think it might win some
votes.
I mean, okay. To begin with, I think that there was a lady that texted you earlier that said that she would happily vote Tory if they were to rejoin the single market.
Yeah,
propose rejoin.
Right, I think she was kind of joking.
That view too, yeah. And you put her in Genius Corner, I think, or
yes.
So I'm with that kind of thing, that he could improve his party's reputation by moving to the centre. But I think I agree that he needs desperately to pull the party with him. But I do think at this point that I think he needs to retain a little bit of personal dignity.
Yeah, well, they're two different things. You've answered. I mean, you've very persuasively and charmingly, but you've answered a question I'm not really asking in terms of how he walks away with reputation intact. We're kind of presuming that he cares about the opinions of people like us, as opposed to possibly caring about the opinions of people tempted by Farage's nativist snarls. And I don't know. That's where I disagree with you about his niceness. He's sailed far too close to the wind on these sort of issues for me to give him the benefit of the doubt. But it's to your credit. It's to your credit that you do. I don't think, though, anybody listening is going to think that what you've just described would minimise the Labour defeat. This is one of those phone-ins that I wouldn't do if I wasn't so quite what the word is, comfortable now in the studio, comfortable on air, because I don't think there are many answers to this question. I think that's the point. I don't think you listening to this now, not you, Ben, but you listening to this now, I don't think you can come, because I can't, and I don't think it's arrogant to say if I can't think of any answers to this question, and I bet you can't either. But I want you to take that as a challenge. 0345 6060 973. What's going to work? He goes after the kind of votes that Farage is hoovering up. Well, he's going to alienate more and more decent traditional Tories, people who don't spend their lives obsessing about foreigners. It just makes this. I would have thought it makes the situation worse. Alan's in Manchester. Alan, what would you do?
Well, he needs to go. He's not looked at what happened to the Labour Party, as in, well, Gordon was more left than Tony, then Gordon got beat. Who, I thought was a brilliant chancellor, by the way. But then we need a real left winger in. So we've got Ed in. And then Ed Miliband got beat. And then, the reason we got beat is because we weren't left-wing enough. So we ended up with Corbyn. The party got infiltrated by Ed bangers. And I remember...
You're speaking as a Labour member, I think, Alan.
Yeah, I'm a member of the party, but we would start on drowning our sorrows after the election defeat, but, when we got hammered.
Yes.
Thinking, and we were saying this is going to take we won't get near being in government for 2 terms, and Starmer's turned the party round. And, if they want to go after Keir Starmer about the lefty lawyer, well, yeah, let's, as far as I'm concerned, bring it on. Let's talk about justice for Stephen Lawrence. Let's talk about all the work Keir Starmer did pro bono for people. Yeah, the thing is, let's talk about how he was in Northern Ireland putting terrorists behind bars. Let's bring that on about Starmer.
But also, and actually, after 10:30, I was going to throw open that question about whether or not the personal attacks on him are likely to work. But we can move there a little earlier. What does that do for the Tory vote? Because I don't see people who fall for this stuff, and you see the people on social media tweeting nonsense about Jimmy Savile. If they're the voters that Sunak thinks he's going to seduce by joining in with the lies and the exaggerations and the embellishments, I think he's got a surprise coming, because they're the ones that are signed up to the idea that they're all as bad as each other, and they're the ones falling for Farage's shtick, aren't they? They're not going to come back to the Tory party because Rishi Sunak has started adopting internet memes telling lies about Keir Starmer as official party policy. I don't think they are.
Well, it worked for Boris Johnson. I mean, I think, did you
but he's
Starmer?
A one-off, isn't he? He's a one-off, Boris Johnson.
Yeah, but I think you interviewed Keir Starmer.
I did.
I think Starmer said that when Johnson came out with that in the Commons, the Tories, the face of the Tory MP, just went, "Oh my God!"
He did.
They will. I mean,
they winced. You're right. I'd forgotten that. He said, I mean, I wasn't there, and Starmer may have been slightly exaggerating, but he did, I think, claim that Johnson's colleagues felt that he'd sort of stepped over a pretty grim line, didn't they?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not like 96, 97, where, it was the Sun what won it. The mainstream, the right-wing press now, the printed media, their influence is waning. And someone once said to me, an old stalwart in the
see the Press Gazette this morning.
someone once said to me, "Look, Alan, when it's again you, it's again you.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot you can do." And I think, I'm doing knocking on doors. Yeah. I won't tell you where it is, because obviously I don't want to influence things. But,
sure.
We were out, and what we do where I am is at the end of the night we take a picture, and we were saying, well, who's going to take it? And this woman stops and said, "I'll do it." And people are actually, when you're outdoor knocking, people are saying hello to you. They're being nice to you. I've not seen that since 97.
So this is where I said we were going to end up at 11 o'clock, is that he can't do anything. So you got to take one call saying he should tackle the reform stuff head on, another call saying he should move back towards the centre, another one saying he should try and hoover up the people that are falling. I mean, the front of the Times, rather, is saying he's got to be nastier about Keir Starmer, but I think Farage has a monopoly on sort of personal viciousness that Sunak just doesn't have the capacity for. So he's doomed, right? And there's nothing he can do. He's just going to sit there.
I think we just the Tories have to accept.
Right, I'll give you.
Sunak is not good at politics, James.
Yeah, but here's the proposal. Here's the breakdown of seats. The majority is 250 for Labour. Theoretically speaking, I'm going to give you 50 grand personally for every seat you can pull out of the bag in the next 2.5 weeks. What are you going to do? 50 grand to you personally for every seat below 250. You see what I mean? So you're never going to move the needle enormously, but I've made it personally interesting enough for you to want to move it even a little bit. What would you do?
The thing is, he has got to try and somehow get back to the centre ground and start doing politics.
Well, then he's pushing people currently voting Tory back towards reform, isn't he? If he does that,
he's trying to outperform reform.
He can't do that.
The thing is, however much I'd loathe the fascist Farage, and that's what he is, James. He's a fascist. He is a slick media operator.
Yeah, for sure.
He is. You can't deny that. I mean, he's a liar. The lies he told over Brexit, and
that's the maddest bit about British politics, isn't it? Is the man who lied loudest and longest about Brexit is somehow going to benefit from the Tory party's inevitable collapse under the pressure, largely, of Brexit being such a disaster. It is absolutely extraordinary. Alan, thank you. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:32 is the time. So one of the most recent models shows Labour with 441 MPs 2 weeks on Thursday, and the Conservatives with 96. And that is a majority in excess of 300. I thought I was exaggerating talking to Alan a minute ago when I conjured up an image of it being 250, but that is 341. That's a 345 seat majority. Just to make this interesting. Oh, well, I hope it is already, but you know what I mean. That's what you say when you're putting a bet on, isn't it? Let's make this interesting. So you've got a 345 seat majority. Let's take that as a given, and you get 10 grand for every seat below that number. You get 10 grand for every seat you knock off that Labour majority. 345. So if you get it down to 340, you're 50 grand up, right? That's you. That's your mission now. You are Rishi Sunak, and you get. I know 10 grand wouldn't make the blindest bit of difference to him, but it would make the blindest difference to you and me, right? So you get 10 grand for every seat you knock off this 345 seat majority. How would you do it? What would you do? You go out there and start chipping away at that lead, starting now. They think attacking Keir Starmer over Brexit, Jeremy Corbyn, and the fact that he used to work as a human rights lawyer could be the way forward. Maybe you think that too, but you're going to have to persuade me. All right? There's 10 grand in it. For every seat you can chip off that majority. What would you do? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. 10:34 is the time. That other bit of the question that Alan reminded us of, introduced to the mix, you could go in on that specifically and whether or not attempted character assassination would work. I don't think it would. Gareth is impressed and he writes, I'd get Farage to take over the Tory party. The votes would go there and we would stop Starmer and you commie lovers and stop the boats. So I don't think that people like Gareth are really engaging in what the rest of us would recognise as reality. So character assassinations of Keir Starmer are not going to make him abandon these sort of weird views, which you see a lot on social media and which must make up a large part of the support for the Reform Party. And 41 of them were friends with the leader of the new fascist movement in this country on Facebook, something that Farage wasn't honest about when he was in with Nick the other day, claiming that they'd just been swapping stuff. Mates send each other things without knowing where it comes from. They'd actually signed up to be friends with a fascist leader. Quite extraordinary, really. And then he did that thing where he tried to pretend it was a working class thing when he said, I apologise that not all of our candidates have been to Eton. Farage knows full well that Oswald Mosley went to Winchester, the same school that Rishi Sunak went to. One of the ugliest things of recent years is the attempts by very, very right-wing, rich, posh people to claim that they somehow represent the interests of people like Gareth in Preston, when obviously the polar opposite is true. But will it work? Will a character assassination work? Where is Starmer vulnerable? Because he doesn't look very vulnerable to me. Awad is in Barnet. Awad, what would you like to say?
I'm just going to apologise quickly. I have a stutter, so...
you don't need to apologise for that. You take all the time you need.
Thank you so much. I am genuinely terrified, and I say this as someone who has door knocked to the Labour Party, is a Labour Party member, because even as much as I detest the Tory Party in its current form, I think Rishi Sunak could certainly help himself win maybe one or two extra seats than he would have by going in the deep end. But I think he's going to leave the Conservative Party worse off in the future.
What's the deep end?
I think he'll be worse. I mean, if he goes full in with the personal attacks on Keir Starmer, I think it will help him maybe win 1, 2, possibly even 3 extra seats than he would have had he not done that. But it will leave the Conservative Party in a much worse state in the next few years.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So you know, the short. I don't know that I agree with you, but your analysis is that there might be some short-term electoral advantage in character assassination attempts, but the damage it does to the Tory brand would be generational. There's a bit of a dichotomy emerging now here. So that either, and it depends, I suppose, on your view of the potential votes that are out there. Either he starts behaving decently, better late than never, and starts trying to distance himself from the nativist snarls and the fantasy figures, and actually starts behaving in a more gentlemanly fashion, or he goes the other way and does what you describe. I think there might be more votes in actually starting to behave with some decency and decorum.
Yeah, I think it is better for him just to stand up and own up to Conservative failure. Just stand up. He can't completely go into the full details because that would be catastrophic as well. But to just say Boris Johnson was this bad, Liz Truss was this bad, and it will hurt.
You can do that with Truss, but he was Johnson's chancellor.
Yeah, absolutely. But I remember Rishi Sunak standing outside of Downing Street and saying integrity and accountability. Now, he can't save the months that he's been Prime Minister, but he can at least help himself in these 2 weeks, because what I'm afraid of is the continuing Faragification of the party and Farage turning into a complete Trump-like figure. With Boris Johnson, we were lucky, because as horrible, as repugnant, as awful as he was, when he left, we didn't have massive protests. When he left, there wasn't as big of a cult-like following in the general public as there was with Donald Trump.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. His personal approval ratings, whatever people like Nadine Dorries have managed to convince themselves of, his personal approval ratings were pretty dismal.
The issue is, sorry for interrupting you, the issue is Nigel Farage, I think, does have that. I've been looking through my social media, and I'm, again, a very left-wing person.
He's better at it.
And I've still gotten Nigel Farage shorts, Nigel Farage TikTok. And the issue with that, and especially with the young voters, and the issue mentioned, I think
he may start cutting through, and we'll see more of a reflection of what's been happening with the far right in continental Europe. You were brilliant. I don't know what you, and I mean it. Don't ever apologise for having a speech impediment. At least not to me. You can do obviously whatever you want in your life, but it's certainly not anything anyone ever needs to apologise for on this programme. And to be honest, if you hadn't told me, I never would have known. Thank you. I'm cracking on just to get more voices. Carl in Liverpool goes right in there. So the idea is that Sunak will go for the jugular by launching personal attacks on Starmer. This is a different sort of jugular altogether. And it ties in with what Awad was just saying. Apologise for the last 14 years, suggests Carl. Announce the scrapping of Rwanda, the reintroduction of two-child benefit, net zero targets, accept a two-state solution and recognition of Palestine, commit to the European Convention on Human Rights, and re-examine or re-enter the single market. Own it all. Tell the public that there will be a return to the centre-right, and kick Sue Ellen, JRM, Gullis and their cronies out. I mean, Carl, unintentionally perhaps, shows us how cautious the Labour Party is at the moment, because they haven't done all or possibly even any of the things that are on Carl's list of tactics that would announce a lurch back to the centre, right. 10:41 is the time. Are there any attack lines missing here? What would you go for? What does Keir Starmer have a jugular? Jeremy Corbyn, Brexit and human rights work. Those are the three things where they think he's vulnerable. Maybe you've got better ideas. Tell me what they are. Joseph's in Stroud. Joseph, what would you like to say?
Damn you, Carl! You just shot my fox.
Is that what you were going to do? I'm sorry, I had no idea.
No, that's all right. I mean, effectively, that's it. So, the kind of socially liberal, fiscally conservative, one nation Tory, southeast, south central voters are now swing voters.
Yeah, you're right.
Whereas previously they were locked down Tory, unless the Tories really pulled a spud from train spotting.
Sure.
Drank too much of the wine and did the classic spud
Yes.
Don't want to get into the details, but we all have the image.
Yes.
Which they've done with Brexit. Really, it's all over the walls now. Nobody can deny it. You know.
So I mean, you're
now
both
for grabs.
So you and Carl are both tacking round Labour. You're actually making an offer to those voters, and I think you're right to.
That would otherwise go Lib Dem.
Yeah.
So Labour's going to because Labour's going for different voters in different places who want different things. Right now the fight's over the kind of those socially liberal, fiscally conservative, voters in the Southeast who would normally swing between the conservative.
I guess that you need to then look at the calculus, don't you, by constituency, and decide where those numbers are actually achievable, which is where my slightly silly £10,000 game actually becomes more pertinent. So we need to identify the seats that we might actually still be able to win or retain, and then cut our cloth accordingly. So we're speaking in broad brushstrokes here about what the party could be doing. It may be that the areas where they are most close to retaining seats are areas where the opposite would work, where the nativist snarls might actually win people over. You wouldn't want to be Rishi Sunak for all the tea in China, would you? 10:43 is the time. Mike's in Charente in France. That's Spain and France featuring on the show today. I'm gratified by that. Mike, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi. You were saying, does Keir Starmer have a jugular? Probably not, but I think Nigel Farage does.
Do you?
I think he's got such a vile past.
Yeah.
That by focusing on that, you could actually let people have second thoughts about it.
I used to think that, and indeed, I did an interview with him 10 years ago. Would you believe, where his vile past became very much front and centre. But here's the thing: you look at the story from earlier this week about almost 1 in 10 members of his candidates running in this election are friends with a fascist leader, with a bloke who sort of makes
indeed.
And it doesn't touch the sides. It doesn't touch the sides, Mike. And do you know why? This is the really grim bit that I think you've overlooked, is the people who like him, as with Trump, don't care about all the disgusting stuff. Look at Trump.
Yeah. I think, but I tell you why, James. I think that there's a hell of a lot of people who sort of like look at reform and say, "Oh, they seem quite sensible," rather than going full on. Yeah, really. I'm
they don't. They look at reform and they think they're as mad as me. I'm going to vote for them. They're as obsessed. They're as obsessed with the boats as I am. They're as obsessed with immigration as I am. That's why I'm going to vote for that. That's what they do.
Well, no, I think there's a sizable chunk of people who actually think, well, that's a quite a good policy. That's quite a good policy, without knowing the background of these people. And actually, just for evidence, okay, it's an anecdote, but I'm on a football forum for my club.
Yeah, be careful. Remember the laws. Well, I push back if you say anything inappropriate.
No. We have a politics section.
Oh yeah.
And there was a couple of people saying, "Oh, I think I might well vote for reform." And I said, and I posted. All I did, I posted that led by donkeys video.
Yeah.
About Farage. I don't know if you've seen it.
I'm in it.
Oh, cool. Good. And a couple of other pieces, like the anecdotes about, and
that worked, did
Alan Sked out. He said, "Oh my word! I didn't realise
that is quite interesting. That is quite interesting. If you need any more ammunition, there's a whole chapter in my book looking at all of those sort of episodes. And maybe I've been doing this too long. Maybe I'm too grizzled when I say it's not even that people don't care about all that disgusting stuff on his record. It's that they actively like it. Maybe Mike's experiences are actually more realistic because he's not completely bombarded every day with the people that have a sort of Trumpian approach to the track record and don't just not mind it, but claim to actively relish it. 10:46 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10 to 11, and it is, as I expected, heading pretty conclusively towards the conclusion that there is nothing they can do. The sort of air of desperation has hung heavy over the Conservative Party pretty much from the moment that Rishi Sunak it took everybody by surprise, including his own colleagues, by calling that election early. Do you know, our tongue was in our cheek, wasn't it, when we suggested right at the outset of this campaign that he'd done it just because he's had enough. We offered that out. There's two things that have come up on the programme recently that were offered up slightly tongue-in-cheek. The first was that he's only called the election because he just wants to get out of there. And the second was that he came back from D-Day early because he didn't want to hang out with the foreign leaders. It was all a bit Brexity. And both of those things now, I think I'd probably say, have a 52-48% likelihood to them. I think both of those positions hold rather more water than we thought when we first shared them. Hey, what other reason can there be for him having gone so early? Anyway, I mention that because his polling is now, according to John Curtis at the University of Strathclyde, the good professor, it's the lowest that it has ever been. The Conservative support is at its lowest point in UK polling history. I'll say that again. Its lowest point in UK polling history. What on earth could they do to salvage some of those percentage points? Answer, we can't even agree. We've got polar opposite proposals in place. He could lurch further to the right, become more unpleasant, launch personal attacks on Keir Starmer and adopt more of the nativist styles that Nigel Farage and Suella Braverman deploy. Or he could pursue decent people and move away from those two positions, start perhaps telling the truth. It's extraordinary to think those are the opposing positions. So he must know that as well, depending on how cynical he is. What shall I do? Shall I go after the racists or shall I go after the decent voters? I'm that desperate now, I might just toss a coin. A mad state of affairs. 10:53 is the time. Mark's in Croydon. Mark, what would you do?
Hi there. It's very similar to what people have said before, but and it's a bit Brewster's Millions, really. But
that's a great film, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I've just told my colleague that he needs to watch it. Basically, his whole film repertoire is worth a watch. But yeah, I think essentially, just being honest, he's obviously very uncomfortable with the situation they're in. He's the first non-white prime minister we've had. And he's sitting in a party that is very, very close to Farage's reform and therefore the extreme right. So there's a phrase which is something along the lines of, what does it matter how you fall? If it's all that's left, how you fall really matters.
How you fall is everything, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
Although this is on a personal level again. That's where the calls began. It's not necessarily going to deliver more votes, but it just does something about the state of public discourse in his final week, 2.5 weeks, to actually try to tack back to a place where reality matters and decency is clear.
Pave the way for a more honest politics, but then also pave the way for the Tory party coming back in the way that I can actually respect it, even though I still wouldn't vote for them. Sure. I'm one of those that wouldn't vote for the Tories, even if they were back to the elder statesmen, the John Majors and stuff. Obviously, John Major had his problems, but as
yes, I know what you mean.
If you saw him talk about Brexit, the John Major sort of panel discussion, one-man panel discussion, that kind of Tory party,
One Nation, old school. You might not have agreed with them, but you did believe them when they told you what they stood for, and it didn't involve lazy populism. How significant was putting Braverman back in the Home Office? Because at the time I was guarding against saying it's game over now. On day one, all hopes that he was going to tack away from the horrors that had gone before, they all disappeared when he put Braverman back in the Home Office. I think now I wouldn't be cautious about that conclusion.
I think that was in a long line of things, but it was really fumbling the ball on day one, wasn't it?
Day one.
It's a bit of a Hail Mary putting a new guy in so soon after putting someone else in, but you've asked for that Hail Mary pass and fumbled it, and everything since has just, it's never really picked up.
Once you allowed that back to the front and centre, and of course she caused him much more trouble in the Home Office than she ever could have done from the back benches. So it was an appalling move, both politically and in terms of competence. Thank you, Mark. I like this from Walter, who says, you missed out the phrase doyen of political polling when you were talking about Sir John Curtis. I will give you until after the news for a correction. Otherwise, I will reach out to Ofcom. Listen, I don't think you have to say it unless he's here. I think that's the law. is that if Professor Sir John Curtice is appearing on your programme, then you are required by Ofcom to say doyen of political polling. If you don't say that, you run the risk of getting taken off air. But I'm with Walter. I am better safe than sorry. So I should earlier, when I referenced Professor Sir John Curtice at the University of Strathclyde describing the Conservatives' current situation as the worst in the history of UK political polling, I should, of course, have described him as the doyen of political polling. My apologies. Richard's in Bristol. Richard, how are you going to save the day?
Hi, good morning. Hope you're well. You've been talking about staggering majorities of 250, 350 seats.
345. Just looking at the latest modelling.
345. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which is
one of them.
Which is quite crazy.
Yeah.
If we take the opinion polls as read.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering whether, Richie's looking to claw back some votes.
Yeah.
Desperately. Could he use the tack that is such an overwhelming majority going to be healthy for democracy?
They've already tried, Richard. This is why the phrase supermajority has been nonsensically introduced into British public discourse. It doesn't mean anything.
Has mentioned it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
would it spook you? I'm intrigued by who this. I think we came up with the phrase last week, the Spookable Horses, which sounds like a rather good 1970s prog rock band. But who are the Spookable Horses? Who looks at the electoral landscape and thinks, I want Labour to win, but I'm worried they might be about to win by too much. I just don't know that voter exists in the kind of numbers that they'd need to exist for the policy, for the idea to have traction. Do you, honestly?
Well, they could use that as the fear factor. It's the case of and we have seen it before with the Tories, where they say, I've been given the mandate to do to run the country, and therefore outcomes.
Therefore, I can do whatever I want. I can unlawfully prorogue Parliament and chuck my own and cull my own. Yeah, but I don't think anyone really sees Keir Starmer as being poised to take advantage of a big majority by breaking parliamentary convention and arguably the law. But I don't know. I mean, what you relay, Richard, whether it's intentional or not, is the desperation in which they are engulfed. Because you even sound as if you're saying, well, I don't know whether it'd work or not, but at least it's something. We've got to put someone on the pitch, haven't we? We've got to put a team out on Saturday. We can't just sort of send out the cleaner. We've got to have but actually the cleaner's all we've got, Gaffer. We're going to have to play the cleaner up front. Everyone else has legged it. Everyone else is off sick. Everyone else is in bed. Everyone else is high. We've got to put a team on the pitch. You know you're going to get thumped. That's what we've just had an hour as an exercise. And what team are you going to put on the pitch? And the answer is, well, I don't know. I don't know. Try that. Try this. Try the other. Try the opposite. Try the cleaner. How is the next 2.5 weeks going to play out, do you think? Well, we are, of course, about to find out. I am going to remind you in the next hour of the importance of voting and actually give you a little bit of help if you haven't registered in working out what you need to do.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time. A complete change of pace now, and indeed a change of tone. We move from the theoretical and perhaps even the fanciful into the grim and factful. An extraordinary piece of journalism undertaken by the Guardian newspaper looking at the impact that poverty in particular has had and is having on schools and GPs. They are, it is reported, informally acting as emergency food providers, welfare advisors, housing officers and social workers. So teachers and GPs and workers in schools and surgeries devoting more and more time and resources to support struggling parents and children. Now, I've got, obviously, a deep need for your help with this, because you know that this is true, because you're in it. Ideally, from that point of being the GP or the teacher. And I just want you to tell me. I've got another question for you in a minute, which is a bit odd, actually, and a bit embarrassing, but I think it's probably quite an important one. But we will begin in a moment with you just telling me about what you have had to do to address the youth hardship or to address the family difficulties that really have nothing to do with your job formally. It is not the job of teachers, for example, to feed children. It's the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, forgive me, that has done this study. It's reported in The Guardian today. And the words here from a deputy head at a school in Bristol, well, they just make you think that we're living in the 19th century, not the 21st. He says, you feed them, he's talking about pupils, you feed them, you clothe them, you tell parents where to go if they're homeless. It's literally everything. It's not even about teaching or learning. It's about keeping them fed, keeping a roof over their head. And that is, I find, well, I'll get onto the embarrassing question in a minute. Primary school staff estimated that 48% of their pupils, primary care staff said 57% of their patients had experienced hardship at some point since the start of the school year or over the past 12 months. Just sit down for a minute and listen to this. A third of schools and nearly half of GP surgeries had set up food banks to provide emergency supplies to hungry pupils and families. You go into the most deprived areas and staff in schools there estimate that 44% of pupils have come to school hungry at some point over the past year. It's 2024. We keep hearing that we're the fifth or sixth biggest economy in the world. Something profoundly wrong with the way our society is ordered. Nearly a quarter of NHS primary care staff and 40% of teachers said they had dipped into their own pockets to help pupils and patients. A nurse gave some underpants still in their packet that she'd bought for her husband to a desperate patient. GPs said penniless patients were missing treatment because they can't afford to travel for hospital visits or afford prescription charges. And of course, the scarcity of health centre appointment slots were being taken up by staff signing forms for patients, benefits forms for patients, writing letters to stop them getting evicted or referring them to food banks. I guess the phrase is firefighting, isn't it? The phrase is firefighting. So you work in healthcare, social care, or education, right? I just want you to tell the rest of us what's happening. And remember, it may be second nature to you. You may know about this, but I think we need to hear it from various horses' mouths. I really want to hear about the simple things you do in order to quote this deputy head in Bristol, in order to feed them, clothe them, and help them know where to go when they're homeless. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. The second question is one that you do not need to have a personal investment in these issues to answer. You don't have to have personal experience of firefighting, feeding children, putting your hand into your own pocket to help somebody desperate with something that is not your job. The second question is what's happened? And by that I want detail. I want explanation, not broad brushstroke, but specific policy-based explanation on what has happened to make this situation so much worse than it was, say, 14 years ago. What are the key political decisions that have driven this decline, all right? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So the first question is, what have you done? And the second question, in a way, is what have we done as a nation? All right, if you hit those numbers now, you will get through. Teachers, I can just about get my head around, but GPs, and that's where the embarrassing question comes in. It's not that I find this difficult to believe. It's just that it feels like it's happening somewhere else. It feels alien to my experiences and my life. We've done a lot on this program over the years about poverty. I've spoken to people on air and off air who've been in desperate situations. But I've always thought of them as being individuals who've slipped through the safety net. I've always thought of them as being extraordinary examples of the system failing. What we're addressing today is the notion of ordinary examples of the system failing. These people being... Do you see, which callers do you remember from the years that we've spent together? I always remember, I don't know why some stick out more than others. I always remember the wife of a teacher in Norfolk, I think it was in Cromer, who talked to us about outside coats and inside coats. Do you remember that call? I think perhaps because her husband was a trainee teacher, was working in a school, I just thought that level of poverty doesn't happen to people in that section of society. But they simply couldn't turn the heating on at the height of the fuel crisis. They simply couldn't afford to turn the heating on. They knew if they did, they would not be able to pay the bill at the end of the month. And so they wore coats inside. But that meant that the coat wouldn't work when they went outside. It wouldn't provide any protection against it being even colder outside. So they had outside coats, another coat that you put on when you're heading outside. And that is what I mean when I draw a distinction between an extraordinary example and an ordinary example. And that's my third question, is how has this gone unrecognised for so long? Why? And I'll use myself as an example. Why don't I realise, why don't I fully appreciate the extent of these problems that are now being reported by school teachers and by GPs? It's 11 minutes after 11. I don't think Idiot's Corner necessarily, but possibly. So, hi, James, how gullible are you? Scum parents choosing to let others feed their kids. If GPs and schools advertise food banks, then feral families will take advantage. I've literally just told you about the family of a teacher that couldn't afford to heat their home. That's... So, you've got two ways to avoid the reality that I'm describing. One is to pretend that it doesn't exist, or to try to convince yourself, like our friend here, to try to convince ourselves that it doesn't exist, that everybody in need is lying, everybody in need is dishonest, everyone in need is lazy. That's a very traditionally a certain type of tabloid Tory line. There's no such thing as poverty until people start complaining about possibly not being able to afford their school fees when Labour bring in VAT, and then poverty is suddenly real. I'm joking, but you know what I'm talking about. And that's where you come out with absolute nonsense, like if you can't afford to have children, then you shouldn't have them. What if we've created a society where hardly anybody can afford to have children under your reading of it? Then I'll tell you what, we're going to need a hell of a lot of immigration, and soon. So that I get that almost sort of self-protective urge to convince yourself that this is not a societal problem. Because if it's a societal problem, then we're part of it. And that's where the second form of denial comes in, which is a form of looking the other way, or just believing that these examples are exceptional. And I'm guilty of that. Even as I read these numbers, I'm thinking to myself, it can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. Because I don't want to believe that it is. And I wonder how big a part that plays in the broader picture, how big a part of our national story that is. The kind of benign ignorance that I think I'm guilty of, as opposed to the violent ignorance that the lazy parent school of thought describes. Maybe we're just as bad as each other. You're sitting there thinking, it can't be that bad, James. Anyway, let's talk about the football. Maybe you're just as bad in the great scheme of things. Maybe I'm just as bad in the great scheme of things as the people sending in to say that you shouldn't have children if you can't afford them. It's just that one is being actively ignorant and one is being passively ignorant. Oh, that works, doesn't it? Passive ignorance. Can't quite believe this. I don't really want to think about it. And then active ignorance. They're all liars. They're all frauds. So, what have you done in your school or in your GP surgery or in your social care workplace? What have you done to just help somebody? And it's a story that, now that you come to think of it, the rest of us will actually be surprised or shocked by. What have you done to help a pupil, to help a parent, or to help a patient in a way that should simply not have fallen to you in the 21st century. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What have you done? And then, how has this happened? And the final question, which you may not want to wrestle with today, but I want to put it out there anyway. The final question is, why is this not front page news every day? How much of that is our fault? Why do we let this happen in the shadows, even as the problems become so huge? All right? 0345 6060 973. So I do need your help with this one. I've pretty much said everything I've got to say. Question number one is one that I categorically can't answer because I'm not in any of these professions. So what have you done to help a pupil, a parent, or a patient in the context of poverty? 0345 6060 973. How have we fallen so far in just 14 years? These problems existed, but not on anything like the scale they exist now. Just look at the proliferation of food banks. And then the psychological question, the sort of social psychological question, which is, how does it stay so secret? All right? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's 11:16.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 11. Schools and GPs are struggling to cope with levels of youth hardship, and yet the rest of us know almost nothing about it. I want to answer both of those questions. What is that struggle? What have you done? What do you do to help a pupil, a parent, a patient? And why do the rest of us not know more and possibly even care more? Brian's in Manchester. Brian, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Great to speak to you.
Likewise.
I retired during the COVID sort of thing, and I got a bit fed up. And I do volunteer work. I deliver sort of end-of-life medicines for a pharmacy and whatever, and for the NHS.
Okay. Yeah.
Into some sort of deprived or needy areas of Manchester and whatever.
Yes.
And over those few years I've been working, I've come across a number of patients who need so much help. I mean, personally, I mean, I'm not a rich man, but,
No.
but I'm okay. I'm retired, and I and the pharmacy themselves, the pharmacists, have been moved to actually help these people financially because they've got nothing. They've got nobody. I mean, these people often have mental health issues. They've fallen through the cracks in that way. They're not getting the help, and you give them money, you lend them money, and I don't expect to get that money back. But without that money, I mean, I gave some money to a lady last year. She was living off dried pasta. I mean, she couldn't even afford to heat the pasta in the pan.
To turn on the oven, to turn on the cooker.
The oven. She had absolutely.
How does
nothing.
that happen? Do you know how that happens? I mean, I don't want to sound naive, but if I'm naive, I'm naive. I'll take my medicine. You presume that the safety net is big enough to catch those kind of cases.
It's family. These people are often estranged from family for a reason. I mean, the person I was talking about on the pasta, their family have moved back to their original country, Ireland. So she's left,
right?
A 70-odd-year-old lady, vulnerable, and she's got literally nobody. She's living.
But
in
she gets a pension. She gets a pension and stuff. There's a few quid coming in. It's just not. It's just one. It's just not enough. This is part of the problem, isn't it? The comprehension problem. In that, if you weren't there, seeing it with your own eyes, you'd think it was anomalous. You'd think that this is an exception. What I'm struck by this morning is what I once would have called extraordinary circumstances becoming increasingly ordinary circumstances for people.
Yeah, and there's other issues as well. And this is not to decry the NHS or whatever.
Of course.
But people who need to get, I've helped. I'm not saying this for anyone to give me a pat on the back. I'm just saying the situation is I've seen people elderly who need to get to hospitals for hospital appointments. And the NHS doesn't have they're so stretched that they can't provide an ambulance or a taxi or whatever. Yeah. So in my spare time, I take them to but I've got the time to do that.
And if you weren't there, they would simply not be seen.
They would either not be seen, or they would have to wait until this thing is, the transport is available to them, and that might be weeks or whatever, and it might be for it might be for a scan for some. These are elderly and vulnerable people who invariably do have conditions that need looking at quite swiftly. So, but this is just the norm. I'd say I've only been doing it a few years, but it's profoundly shocked me to see the actual, depth of the need and the need for. I mean, the system's being held together by people sort of going out of their way
above and beyond, either in a volunteer capacity or just doing things that are simply not part of their job description, which would fit you. And you're working in the private sector effectively. You're not a public servant. You're not working in.
No. I'm a volunteer, actually. I'm a volunteer, but if you come across people like that, I mean, and I'm retirement age and whatever,
sure.
you can't turn away from them, can you? You just can't. If I'm just going to go home and spend 2 hours on my garden, and this is this, but and I'm not alone. I know other practices that do the same thing and whatever. Because if they didn't, these people, I don't know where these people would get the help from, and some of them would. I know you're not after compliments, but you're a lovely man, and you focus the mind as well on the final question, which I'd ask you, and you may not have an answer to it. Why does all this stuff stay in the shadows? Even on a day like today, you kind of know we're going to have this conversation, and then at 12 o'clock we're going to talk about something else. There's no topic under the sun that we can talk about for 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. But why does the Joseph Rowntree Foundation have to blow the whistle on things that are happening under so many noses every day? What's the sort of... It's almost like a societal conspiracy of silence. Where does that come from, do you think? I'm not sure it's a conspiracy of silence.
What is it?
I think it just become what you're doing. I first started out just delivering medicines to people, but then it becomes the norm.
Yeah.
Just in the way it's become the norm for a teacher to now be serving breakfast and being a social worker and acting as a mental health intermediary. I think it's just become the norm, and we just get on with it because
so you're a boiled frog then?
Well, well, you've obviously seen my photographs. Yes, I have a boiled frog.
No, what I mean is that I'm sitting here going, "Oh my God," and you're actually going, "Well, that's just Monday. That's just what happens." So there's a massive disconnect between the people living it.
You become sort of numb to it. In many ways, you're kind of looking out for it and you're expecting it. I'm not saying it's the norm across all.
Of course you're not.
I mean, this is for a minority of.
But it's still a minority. But you're looking at
2,000 patients.
Yeah.
2%. It's a big old number.
Yes, it is. And in some areas, the numbers are much higher. A third of schools, half of GP surgery setting up food banks, which is part of the same project, isn't it? Is helping people get stuff that they need and can't get or haven't got. Thank you, Brian. It's the safety net, isn't it? We're talking about the consequences of not having one anymore, or at least having one that is threadbare and full of holes. And that's why the second question was, how has this happened? I suppose austerity is going to be a huge part of it. Because that, of course, sees people like teachers and police officers, never mind pharmacy volunteers, doing things that would once have been done by others, but they're not there anymore. I don't know. 25 after 11 is the time. The teacher who has to feed the child. I want to hear from you as well. 0345 60600973, because Brian nailed something there. You think, I'm not ringing James, it's just normal. He won't be interested in my story. But it's not normal. That's part of the problem in the third question of this. Conspiracy of silence isn't quite the right word. But it might be normal to you. It's not normal to the rest of us. Just try to remember the beginning of this journey and how surprised you were the first time you had to do that. Margarita is in Tunbridge Wells. Margarita, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello.
Yes, thank you very much. I really enjoy listening to your programme. I'm a great fan of yours.
That's very kind.
You're welcome. So I used to be a counsellor, and was with the borough council.
Yes.
And I was helping a lady who had been made homeless because she was evicted towards the end of August of 2023. And so she went to the council, obviously, to get help.
So it was a sort of no-fault eviction, was it, Margarita? She just her landlord just sort of pulled the plug on her tenancy, kind of.
No, not quite like that. She was in deep arrears, actually, and it was a housing association rental. So it's not that they didn't have reason to evict her, but I'm not sure what the process was and whether she actually got, the necessary notices or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, the point is she's homeless and she comes to you.
That's right. She came to me and she said, I've been trying to get onto the housing register and so on. And to cut a very long story short, she was then served. Well, she didn't get rehoused at all, even though she was an emergency situation. Then they actually she had to appeal against a decision which took her out of the housing register and also made her.
What were you most surprised by? What was the lesson you took? What were you most shocked by with regards to the relationship she had with what we'll loosely describe as the system?
Well, they said. You're not eligible because or considered vulnerable, even as a result of old age or mental health, or because she was over 60, and it just beggars belief because she had lost her job.
So you presumed there'd be something to catch her.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, the law itself is actually to blame here because it does say that you've got to show that you're really in more need than anybody else, even though you're homeless. And I just, find that is
a kind of
incredible.
A Dutch auction, but that's housing shortages as much as anything else, isn't it? But that absence of the safety net, Margarita, is very stark, very well described. Just that. I don't think it's complacent. It's a presumption, especially if you pay a lot of tax. You just presume that there's a safety net there for people who get into trouble, and there isn't. And whether it is a child turning up at school who's hungry or the patient who can't afford new pants. All of these stories in the Joseph Rowntree Foundation report today, and examples of homelessness as well, as Margarita has just told us. I don't know. Do we put Mark in Idiot's Corner? Mark's listening to this and feeling sorry for himself. He's just texted to say, James, you just showed your prejudice against us landlords. Well done. You just showed your true colours. Imagine listening to a conversation about homelessness and child hunger and thinking, people don't feel sorry enough for landlords. Mark, come on, mate. You must be better than that. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I think the language is part of the problem as well, isn't it? So, Mark in Tooting writes, Morning, James. There are currently 145,000 children who are homeless in the sixth richest economy in the world. And there's a danger that we think that, well, come off it. I've never seen a child sleeping on the streets. But homelessness does not mean rough sleeping. Homelessness can be temporary accommodation, of course, or sofa surfing for adults. That sometimes the language, perhaps. I'm fascinated by how much of the iceberg is below the surface of the sea. So we see the iceberg, but we only see what's above the waterline. And as you know, massive majority of icebergs are below the waterline. That's what this conversation is about. And I don't know what you do. How do you make the rest of the iceberg more prominent, more visible, more pertinent to the national conversation? I don't know. So the world is divided, isn't it? Or the country is divided between people who are forced to address these issues every day by either their own circumstances or their job. So they're either suffering from the condition or alleviating it. And the rest of us who read the stories, see the statistics, but sort of take it all with a pinch of salt or look the other way. Or if you're built a little differently in terms of compassion and empathy, you think it's all lies or exaggeration or self-inflicted. There's no bridge between the people who are not living it and the people who are. I don't know why that is. Anne's in Bristol. Anne, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I will tell you how many times I've nearly picked the phone up to speak to you, and I've finally done it.
And this is the one that got you. You see, I got you in the end, Anne. I got you in the end. Yeah. Go on.
Well, when I started to think about my work with local charities and for many years, and also children's centres and as a school governor and what have you, well, when the austerity sort of policy kicked in, I could see the changes coming in the children's centres. Lots and lots of things were decimated overnight, such as the parent support advisors in schools, which were fantastic, the children's centres, family support workers, and a lot of the things that they'd put on for parents to come in and get to know how to manage things better or how to look after your child, how to help your child's language development and things like that. There were loads of things. It was like a fantastic array of things you could do as a young parent if you needed it. And the thing that really used to help also was school nurses. School nurses were like the hidden gems of the school system. Where if I have a child with a disability who's 40 now, but when in my day, you could go to her and she would sort of help you navigate all sorts of things in a very quiet and understated way. Well, lots of those things just went overnight, so we were left with huge gaps where people were there that picked up that were the safety net.
It's the rhetoric of a smaller state, isn't it? Austerity plus the ignorant fetishisation of what they call a smaller state or a smaller government. They never really stop.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry, dog.
That's all right. Was that my voice? Did I set the dog? I hope I didn't set the dog off. That would be embarrassing. No, I did. I've done it again. So shush, get down, boy, down. That not really thinking through what it means. You know, we've got to cut this budget. We've got to save some money here. But actually, under your analysis, over years, over decades, it's going to end up costing society a hell of a lot more.
Oh, it will do. I've because of the charity that I was involved with and was with for 30 years. Part of my role was to look at how we could access different types of funding. What were we doing that was meeting the needs and all the rest of it, you know? And I used to look into the sort of levels of poverty for all sorts of things, and not just people with disabilities, but how many people who are in prison, for instance, who've got speech and language difficulties, who've got a lower level, got learning disabilities.
The figures are extraordinary. That's the best example, probably, of where spending money would save fortunes in the long run, because A, they wouldn't be in prison, they wouldn't be coming back to prison shortly after being released, and B, they wouldn't be committing the crimes that got them there.
And one thing, when I was, because I was involved in early years, and having so much investment in early years was like an amazing sort of overnight change for early years. Suddenly, early years was being recognised that it wasn't when children got to school that they started learning, and you started learning about them. It was from the word go, the word
that was 97. You know, that was new. That was a big New Labour push, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. And it was staggering to see how some of the people around us, the professionals, suddenly realise that actually, if you do that, then you do make a difference to the 15-year-olds.
But it's all about ripple. It's all because if you're a teacher, a bit later, not early years, but if you're dealing with a hungry pupil, or you're dealing with parents who are facing homelessness, then that's going to have a ripple effect on all the children in the class. There's so much bandwidth is being used up in firefighting that people can't do the job that they signed up to do as effectively as they would want to. That's crazy.
Right. So,
thank you, Anne. I think you've got a dog that needs walking.
Yeah.
We'll talk again now. You've broken your duck. That's it. Now you'll become a habitual caller to the programme, I hope. 11:38 is the time. James makes a pertinent point. It's not the 6th richest economy in the world. It's the 6th largest. And what's the difference? I think the difference is probably per capita GDP, isn't it? So you can say we're the 6th largest economy in the world, and then you say, all right, how's it shared out? So take the GDP and divide it by the number of people in the country, and then get back to me, and then tell me what the actual distribution is, and we'll work out whether we are the 6th richest or the 6th largest. Because if everyone has got all the money, if one person has got all the money, it's still the 6th largest. But you're certainly not the sixth richest, are you? Because the rest of us are eating dried pasta. David's in Farringdon in Oxfordshire. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. This is a really interesting conversation. Your analogy about the iceberg, I very much was looking at the tip, basically. I'll admit it. My ex-wife, she was a head teacher in a village primary school. Okay. It's a very affluent village. Yes. If you drove around it, you would think, wow, what a brilliant place to live. She was buying bags of shopping for food to take in to distribute to some of the parents. Some of the parents, they had dependencies on substance and things like that. Yeah. And so they'd fallen through the net. And your previous caller summed it up about, lack of support workers, help to manage, helping people how to manage better. So she would go around to parents, sit down with them, speak to them. They may be having relationship issues. It could be substance abuse type issues, things like that, which was impacting their own children. So she was having to do a lot of other work apart from being a head teacher. And as you say, it's this ripple effect. You take away funding, you cut costs, and it has an impact. It may not have an impact overnight. It will have an impact over time. And the most important thing is that she was doing it because the kids were the innocents in all of this.
And I wonder, I don't know how cynical they are. I'm thinking of George Osborne and David Cameron chiefly at this point because of the architecture of austerity. But if someone had explained to them, as presumably, they've just as much access to the work of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation that the rest of us have. So if someone had explained to them, I wonder if consciously or subconsciously, they are just expecting people like your ex-wife and all the other callers that we've had today to take up the slack that has been described. It's almost as if they've priced it in to austerity. And because we talk a lot about the NHS surviving on the goodwill of doctors and nurses, doing unpaid overtime, going without breaks, putting in their extra yards. And that is, not eternally, not infinitely sustainable. But the same thing seems to be happening in schools and GP surgeries. People stepping up to do things that are not part of the job description because the alternative is a form of collapse.
Well, maybe it's David Cameron's big society or whatever you like to call it.
You're the first to mention it on air, but I've got 5 or 6 texts pinging in, all saying that's what it was, because he did sort of say people will have to put their shoulder to the wheel. But I thought he meant picking up litter on Sunday mornings. I didn't think he meant feeding hungry children. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, no, totally. And it's just become the norm for teachers.
And that's the second. You're the second person to talk about the norms. That's why I said to Brian about boiling frogs. It's one of my favourite analogies. It's not actually biologically sound, but the idea that the country is divided. And David describes himself as someone who was on the other side, is thinking, well, it can't be that bad. Or there's the tip of the iceberg. There's someone sleeping in the doorway of a local shop, or there's someone begging outside Greg's, or whatever it may be. That's the tip of the iceberg. That's not the extent of the iceberg. It's the tip of it. Thank you, mate. Steve's in Grimsby. Steve, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
We spoke just before Christmas on Rishi Sunak's stupidest 5 decisions. So I've got to say, I've got to be careful, James. I'm the father of a head teacher.
Oh yeah.
So, yes. So I know for a fact in the previous schools, and probably this one, she's a lot of times put her hand in her own pocket, and she's no sort of hero.
She is actually, but what you mean is it's not exceptional behaviour in her world, but it is still heroic behaviour in mine.
Yes, that's very kind, and I'm sure she would take it, James, and I would. She's a wonderful human being, and what she does is for the kids. But the point I want to make is what you said earlier, which is absolutely true. Is what this government have done for the last 14 years, have done a remarkable job of making us avert our eyes from it.
Yeah.
By telling them that these people are the undeserving poor, that they can't eat or feed their families or clothe their families because they've all got forgive the pun with Rishi Sunak, they're all watching Sky TV or drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, James, a great deal of the public have bought it. So they look at these people, they look at the people sat outside on the steps of banks who are begging that they're the undeserving poor. But, you know,
and the TV shows. Let's not forget the TV shows. I think that they're in retreat now, aren't they? Those kind of shows, but I think they were called poverty porn, and they very much played in to the idea that everyone was either living a life of Riley on welfare payments or entirely responsible for their own plight. I used to think that was a bit simplistic, because when I started in this job, it was very common on phone-in radio to encounter precisely the kind of positions that you describe. It was a sort of broadcast equivalent of Sun columns and Daily Mail columns. The thing I don't know, and we touched on this in the last hour in the context of broader politics, is whether or not the right-wing politicians actually believe it, because you and I see it as cynical tabloid scaremongering. You know what, and I, you know, I've had colleagues who've done it in the past, and I know what they're playing at. They're just not being very nice, and they're preying on people to sort of put bums on seats or to sell newspapers. But what about the current generation of Tory MPs? I increasingly think that they actually believe the stuff that's been punted out by the right-wing media, so they don't believe that there is poverty. Ian Duncan-Smith, for example, what do we think? Does he believe in the same way that your average Sun reader just believes that they're all living up on flat-screen TVs and gallons of...
James. And that's the lie that everybody's bought. Just very quickly, I became a mental health first aid instructor through Mental Health First Aid England. What shocked me, James, is when you do get people, because of all the things we're talking about as a knock-on effect on the children, on the families, is the number of people who used to come in, because I've stopped doing it.
Yeah.
Because the number of people that used to come in, well, the problem with mental health, it's this week's bad back.
Yeah, well, that's Mel Stride now. That's government policy, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right, mate. Crikey.
So what happens is, James, is you drive it underground. So people who are terrified of what's happening to them and feel very vulnerable and feel anxious and depressed, they don't want to say anything to anybody because they're frightened of what the reaction is going to be. And I have to say, James, unfortunately, 99% of that's probably a bit high. A very large majority of their reaction is going to be, well, pull yourself together, get on
pull
with
the
it.
Socks up, right? But and it works so well, doesn't it? I mean, to the point where the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions clearly believes that millions and millions of people are getting sick notes just by asking for them, that it's an incredibly easy process to go through, and that they're not really sick at all. They could just... You speak to people with crippling anxiety who can't even leave their house. Here's a message from a doctor just while Steve was talking. The longest waiting time for an appointment at our surgery at the moment is for our wellbeing advisor. And that's at 6 weeks. These are the people who are struggling to keep it together, to keep their heads above water. They've got to wait 6 weeks to see the wellbeing advisor. But in Mel Stride's universe, you just need to turn up at the GP surgery, sort of cough a bit, and you'll be signed off sick for the rest of your life. It's a complete disconnect. I lost a text complaining about me using disconnect as a noun. I was going to get pedantic on your message. It isn't. You can use disconnect as a noun. It always has been. It is the noun that describes what happens when the verb to disconnect is enacted. So the disconnect, or the gulf, it's a synonym for golf. Disconnect is a synonym for golf between the people that know it and the people that don't. It's crazy. It's coming up to 11:48, and of course the only way you can ever change anything is by voting. And the importance of voting is acute, always, particularly perhaps more acute in this election than in others. And it is still not too late to register to vote. And shortly I will introduce you to the head of external communications at the Electoral Commission, who will bring you chapter and verse on what you can do right now to make sure that you have your democratic rights properly observed 2 weeks on Thursday.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:52. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There was a lovely moment. I can't remember where it was. Someone described to me taking their children to vote with them at the locals, and they've been quite apathetic on the way there. It was on air, wasn't it? I think. Maybe you can remember it as well. And when they got there, they just found something quite magical about engagement in the democratic process. And more of that, please. There's no downside, is there, to enthusiasm for engagement in the democratic process. But it is not as easy to engage as it used to be. Nikki Nixon is the head of external communications at the Electoral Commission and joins me now to sort of sound an alarm. We're close to deadline day. What needs to be done, and what do you want people to do?
We want people to register to vote. So people have until midnight tomorrow to register. Anybody that isn't on the register won't be able to vote on polling day on the 4th of July. So it's really important that people are registered. How do I know, Nikki, whether or not I am on the register? Well, unfortunately, there isn't a system you can log on to check your registration status. But if you've already had your poll card through, then you'll be registered. And if you voted before and your details haven't changed, then you'll be on the register. But if you've moved house or your name has changed, then the best thing to do is re-register. And how do I do that? So you can do it all online at gov.uk, register to vote. It's a really simple, quick process. You'll just need your name, date of birth, national insurance number and your address. And then that's it, you're done. You just need to be aged 18 or over on polling day. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? So someone who's listening to this who is 17 is actually entitled to vote if they turn 18 next week. So so they can check. You need to be British, Irish or a qualifying Commonwealth citizen. Yes, that's all to do with permission to remain in the UK. OK, so people will know their status on that one. 2.1 million applications to register since the general election was called on the 22nd of May. Is that par for the course, or are these numbers higher or lower than usual? I think that's what we would expect. It's great to see so many people are registering, and hopefully it will go up again. We always see a spike in the last 24 hours. So we're hoping that it will continue to increase right up till the deadline at midnight tomorrow. Tell me about the groups that your research has shown to be less likely to be registered. So it's typically people who've moved home, but also private renters and young people. I mean, you mentioned engagement for young people. They do tend to be under-registered. So it's really important that they hear the message, that they understand they need to be registered, and then that they get out and vote as well on polling day. And the photo ID as well, of course, is crucial this time round, isn't it? That's a relatively new development, even for those of us who voted loads of times in the past. That's right. It's the first general election at which people will need to show ID. There's a long list of the different types of ID that you can use. To give a few examples, you can use a passport, a driver's license, a blue badge, some bus passes. If anybody wants to check, they can go on the Electoral Commission website. We know that the vast majority of people already have one of these forms of ID, but there are people that don't. And for those that don't have an accepted form of ID, they can apply for free ID. It's called a voter authority certificate. Again, a very, very simple process. You'll get an A4 sheet of paper from your local council, and you can take that to the polling station and you can use that to prove your ID. But it has a photo on it, does it? It does. So when you apply, you upload a photo along with your name, national insurance number and address, and then you've got that piece of paper. Don't laugh. But I'm just wondering whether, in order to engage some of the younger people listening to this, do you think they could use that as ID in a pub? It can't be used. It can't be used in a pub. Thank you for not laughing. You laughed. I said don't laugh. Cool enough. No, fair enough. I've got an 18-year-old at home, and the pub ID seems to be at a bit of a premium at the moment. Finally, Nikki, the postal votes and the proxy votes. Tell us about those. Yes, there are deadlines to apply for these as well. If you want to vote by post, you've got until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 19th of June to register. But you can also vote by proxy. So this is when you ask somebody that you trust, who is also eligible to vote in these elections, and crucially, who can get along to your polling station to vote on your behalf. And if you want to apply for a proxy vote, the deadline is 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 26th of June. So, but you'd already be registered, wouldn't you? So if you're not registered by midnight tomorrow, you can't apply for either of these things. Exactly. They're not alternatives to being registered. So get yourself registered by midnight tomorrow. Reminders of the website again? So it's gov.uk/register to vote. OK, and that will come up on a Google search as well. But if you want to actually go direct to the site, gov.uk/register-to-vote. Has the site ever crashed? I quite like the idea of sending so many people in your direction at the moment that the site might struggle under the weight of my listenership. It does manage a lot of applications, especially in those last 24 hours. But it's been fine in the last few years, so we're not worried about that.
So midnight tomorrow.
That's right, midnight tomorrow. Yes.
Nikki Nixon, thank you, Head of External Communications at the Electoral Commission. A bit of a truism, isn't it, to say if you don't vote, you're not allowed to moan about what happens next, which means you won't be allowed to listen to me. So if you don't vote, you won't be allowed to listen to me for the term of the next. But yeah, all right. I mean, you will. But don't forget also the photo ID. That is the first time in a general election, as Nikki just explained. It's really straightforward. I mean, when we voted at the locals, everyone turned up with a passport, or a driving license. But still, it would be incredibly annoying if you turn up and you're not allowed to cast your vote because you haven't brought along any ID. And that voter authority certificate, you can do all of that online. All you need is a photograph that's uploadable. But, everyone's got that on their phone these days, haven't they? It is coming up to 11:59. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And I haven't got time to go back to Robert or Miriam or John, but we will return to some of these questions about poverty. And crucially, I sometimes feel that I can always tell when I haven't quite nailed what I was trying to nail, that that word disconnect, that relationship between a problem and the rest of society that is not suffering from the problem. We'll be returning to that, I think, sooner rather than later. Should we do some crowdsourcing? Do you want to decide what we talk about next? I've got quite a few things. There's a really interesting story. It's a story that fascinates me about green spaces in schools, but given that we've just been talking quite a lot about children in schools and privilege and deprivation, that may be a bit samey. But what is the importance of green spaces? I also love the story about the new reality of working from home and the fact that the world, whether they wanted it to or not, has changed forever, and what that means and the good and the bad of it. But unless you persuade me otherwise, the tale I'm really drawn to next is the incredible shortage of builders.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I think that I would describe it as a Brexit benefit. Very specifically, Nick had a caller just as I was coming into the studio towards the end of his programme earlier, describing how their wages had enjoyed an enormous boost from the disappearance of qualified tradespeople in the aftermath of Brexit. So the people left here, wherever they're from, whether they were British-born or EU citizens or whatever constituency you belong to, if you were still in the business, then your wages went up. I know the plural of anecdote is not data, but I would call that, up to a point, I'd call that a Brexit benefit. Can you work out what point? Well, most of us are customers, aren't we? So it might be a Brexit benefit for a builder to see, or a tradesman or woman to see their wages go up, but they weren't that low to start with in the great scheme of things, and it means that those of us who need some work done are going to have to pay more for it than we would previously. I've oddly not told you much about this latterly, but we've had loads done lately. We've been doing a fixer-upper, as they are called, and there are few things more valuable than trustworthy and reliable tradespeople. You know that, and if you find someone good, you'd hang on to them for forever. You really do. Appreciate the value of someone who is, affordable is important, but reliable is the most important aspect of all. This survey is important on almost every imaginable level. Hundreds of thousands of householders have waited more than a year to find a builder to work on their homes. Daily Mail have picked up this story, I think, in conjunction with a national construction audit conducted by Fix Radio. And it's found that since 2021, 415,000 people have spent more than 12 months waiting for work to begin. Now, when I was being introduced to this issue, and I was being introduced to Euroscepticism by callers to this programme, starting sort of 15 years ago, very, very often I'd take a call from, not always a builder actually, but someone who knew a builder or the partner of a builder or the father of a builder who insisted that their industry, their profession, was being absolutely decimated by people coming here from the European Union and sort of undercutting them. But then there'd be a bit of a Schrodinger's problem with this one, because they'd also claim that they then had to go in and fix all the bad work that the foreign builders had done. And so I'd find myself, so you are getting lots of work then. So it was a very early canary down the Brexit coal mine, the idea that the construction industry, that the trades were particularly susceptible for foreign labour. Now, unskilled labour is a different thing, isn't it? Would you believe? You categorically wouldn't have believed it. But my first ever pay packet was for unskilled labour on a building site. I'm just going to let that settle. My first ever pay packet was for unskilled labour on a building site. Special prize for anyone who can remember, because I have told this story before, but not for a very long time. I see how many people can text me the town in which I worked as an unskilled labourer in 1988. And here's the thing, it's back-breaking work. In fact, I've got a mate who's a builder whose back now is almost preventing him from working at all. He's in almost constant pain. He's taking way too much medication just to get in and do the work. I've got another mate who's a painter and decorator, who you may know from Twitter, Gary. He's brilliant at what he does, but he's also a machine. You know, he's physically a machine. He's in incredible physical shape. In the back of my mind, I've got images of builders from back in the day who were not in incredible physical shape, in which case I imagine that the shelf life is short. It's very, very hard work building. And therefore, when I read about the importance of training our own, or the importance of getting rid of foreign labourers, I'm always wondering who they are talking about. Who's going to do it? Who do you mean? You said, we'll get rid of all the foreign builders, we'll get rid of all the Poles, we'll get rid of all the Eastern European builders. And so who's going to step into the breach? Is there an army of people that really want to be heating engineers or roofers or carpenters, but have somehow been prevented from doing it by circumstances? And part of the problem here is a shortage of training. Bricklayers, plasterers, roofers and carpenters last year. See, this is the problem. The Daily Mail has to report it because it's got a story about the 400,000 of their potential readers waiting over a year for a tradesperson. But what they don't say, when it actually happened, was that they got added to the shortage occupation list last year. I told you that. Well, I didn't even know that had happened, and I'm James O'Brexit. I told you ages ago that eventually there's going to be so many professions on the shortage occupation list that we'll have freedom of movement. It'll be back, except it will be entirely in one direction. We won't be able to go anywhere. Our children won't be able to go and work in foreign countries, but we'll be so desperate for everything from vets to bricklayers that they get on the shortage occupation, and they already are. They already are on the shortage occupation list. So we are now so short of bricklayers, plasterers, roofers and carpenters that they get exemptions on the take back control nonsense that was used to sell Brexit. And tradespeople were queuing up to tell me that they couldn't wait to get out of the European Union, so that I don't know what was supposed to happen. You remember when the Co-op Live Arena kept not opening? Do you remember that? They kept reporting, well, that was supposed to open last night. Do you know what caused that? A shortage of workers, a shortage of tradespeople. And it's not just that, that's just one example. So major projects are not being completed on time because they don't have the skilled workers that they need. So that argument about wage compression, it is real. It's nowhere near as big a problem as the usual suspects pretended. But within the context of unskilled labour, I can just about see how that's a problem. You've got no skills at all. You're just muscle on a building site, or you're muscle on a job. Then maybe there'd be a little bit of a little bit of give, if you like. And you could argue that having so many people coming here from overseas has pushed down wages for unskilled labour. To which my response would be quite right wing, actually. I'd say, well, if you don't like what you're getting paid as an unskilled labourer, get some bloody skills. but how hard is it to get the skills? So you can see where this conversation's going. You can see the questions that we're nudging ever closer to. It comes from both sides, really, of the transaction. It's why do we have such a severe skills shortage? Okay? And I don't mean the obvious answers. Well, it's because we haven't got enough people doing the jobs, James. I mean, why did you not want your son to follow you into the trade, or your daughter? So you might be... Plasterers make a lot of money, don't they? I mean, that's skilled labour. A really good plasterer is worth his weight in gold. So why would you not be encouraging young people to go into this trade? Here's a good example. Jim's been in touch. Just as I was saying that out loud, I'm a painter and decorator. I was speaking to a plasterer a few months ago who wanted to take on an apprentice, but he couldn't because the local college isn't running the plastering course anymore because there weren't enough people applying for it to justify it. So I would have thought that there'd be more demand from young people to go into these trades because they are comparatively well paid. You get paid more as a skilled tradesperson these days than you would as a teacher, a sort of entry-level job. So why don't people fancy the work is not answered by this question. 03456060973. So the obvious answer is, they've closed the training courses. But they've closed the training courses because people weren't applying for them. And I want to know why people weren't applying for them. Apprenticeships, all sorts of ideas that could improve this, but apprenticeships are one of those things that I've heard politicians banging on about since I was working on a building site in Doncaster in 1988. I was rubbish. My God, it's hard work. I don't think I've ever been as tired in my life as I was for that fortnight. Very deep experience of the building trade, 2 weeks on a building site 30 odd years ago. But more than 30 odd years ago. I've never been so, I would get in, I was staying with some family friends in South Yorkshire. I'd get in, I'd eat an enormous meal, and then I would fall asleep in front of the television. And then I'd go to bed. That was it. I was so physically exhausting labour is something that a lot of people will have no experience of. Genuinely physically exhausting labour. And it means, I guess, that the job is not quite what those of us who've never done it imagine it to be. And that will be part of the answer to the question of why have we got such shortages? Why don't young people want to do it? Is there snobbery attached? Is it actually quite straightforward in that why would you want to work outside in this country? I mean, why would you take any job that involves hard graft and discomfort when there's a job available that does not involve hard physical graft and discomfort? But here's me in my middle-class bubble. Ready? Here's me in my middle-class bubble asking why more young people don't want to go into these trades. I don't know that we need any other questions. I am kind of interested in who's had the worst experience of waiting. What would be the worst thing that needed doing? A roof, I suppose. You've got a leaky roof or your toilet's broken or something like that. And if you're really waiting over a year for somebody to come and do it, that could be pretty unbearable. But let's begin with the shortages. And I'll allow myself a quick Brexit moment because I thought it was a Brexit benefit when I heard the fella telling Nick earlier that his wages, shot up in the immediate aftermath. But now, unless you are actually in one of these professions, it's bad news for everybody else. You've got delays, you've got increased costs, and if you voted for Brexit in order to, protect British workers, well, that failed as well because all of these roles, bricklayer, plasterer, roofer, carpenter, they're all on the shortage occupation list, which is the admission from the Home Office that we haven't got enough people doing these jobs. Every time I mention Brexit now, I find myself noting that the precise opposite of what was promised has actually happened. All of the things that they said would get better have got worse. And here we are. It's 12:15.
James O'Brien on LBC.
18 minutes after 12 is the time, and the number you need is 03456060973. 2/3 of Britons told these researchers that they didn't receive enough encouragement to pursue a career in the trade sector while at school, but only 18% of parents said they would not want their children to work in the construction industry. because they don't believe they would earn enough money. I think you'd be surprised. I really do. And once you know the sort of wages that are available for skilled labour now, the question of why more people aren't going into it becomes more pertinent. So let's start answering it. Ryan is in Southampton. Ryan, what would you like to say?
I'd only like to echo what you've been saying, really. You can quite easily earn £30,000 per year straight out of school as a labourer nowadays.
And that's unskilled, is it?
Yeah, quite easily. £120 a day, £250 days a year, roughly.
Yeah.
And you can,
What about skilled? Tell me, what do you do? Have you got your own construction company? Are you?
Yeah, my brother and I own a small construction company in Southampton.
Okay.
We are.
Tell me your life story, will you? And I mean briefly. Just in terms of what did you do in terms of training or preparation to go into that? Was it your dad? Did you inherit it from your dad? Did you follow your dad into the trade?
No, my brother and I basically just went into the construction industry when we were young. We then employed my dad,
right,
and trained him up because we were struggling to get people.
But did you go to college? Did you do like a course?
No, my brother done a bricklaying course,
right,
and I was more along the project management side of things because it does take a lot of organisation to do construction, and we just cannot get anybody who is able and willing to work outside in all weathers and do the work. And they just don't wish to take on board the skill sets and the abilities to set them up for life. You can earn a lot of money in this game.
But you also are going to be knackered all the time, not to put too fine a point on it.
Totally. I haven't moved all weekend, if I'm honest with you.
Because you're shattered. So there it is. I mean, this is your lived experience. You need people. I presume Brexit is what knocked the stuffing out of the labour supply.
Yes, it gave me a pay rise, though.
Yes, exactly that. But that's bad news for customers, in a sense, in that we all end up paying more. So, I could sit here and say, hooray, a Brexit benefit. It's going to cost me loads more to get my roof fixed. But you can say it is a Brexit benefit. My wages have gone up. But you still can't get people. There's a trade-off, isn't there?
There is, and I could probably double, triple the size of the business overnight at the moment with the amount of work that's in front of us.
So how long are you quoting ahead for? If you come around mine now, when would you be able to start work?
October next year.
I mean, that's relevant to economic growth. I mean, if there are thousands of businesses like yours in a similar situation, then that is transactions on ice, transactions being held that could in fact be driving economic 100%. Growth at the moment. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
The other side to that is that there are people out there that think they can do the work properly and can't, and people are getting ripped off left, right and centre.
Twas ever thus.
The industry a bad name.
But the longer the waiting for a reputable tradesman, then the more likely, the bigger the space into which the disreputable ones can move. I don't think I'll get it today, actually, but sometimes in the immediate aftermath of Brexit, when people were ringing me to complain that they couldn't get staff, in the catering industry in particular, I'd get a lot of messages saying, well, pay me more then. Pay me more. So how do you respond to the, and I won't get that text today because the conversation is coming from a different angle, but the text that says, well, you'd get staff really easily if you just paid them more. If you cut your margins, took home less money, you'd be able to hire more staff on better wages.
Contrary to belief, there is a lot of money to be made, but building construction industry do work on quite small margins. And the only way that you are going to be able to afford the uplift in wages is to charge more, and that has obviously its own repercussions.
And it's reached a sort of critical mass where you can't pay the sort of wages you would need to pay to fill. Well, or do the people simply not exist, Ryan? Like you could double what you were offering and you still wouldn't get any applications.
Yes, and you've got to be careful as well that when you employ people, say you double their wages overnight, you probably would get lots more people come in, but you would then probably ruin your reputation because they probably can't do the work. They do a poor standard.
Well, you'd soon work that out, but they'd be coming from somewhere else. So the pool of the pool of skilled labour is actually finite.
Yes.
And so any talk from politicians of building hundreds of thousands of new houses,
it's not going to happen.
Is currently pie in the sky.
worse than that, in my opinion.
Are you a parent?
Soon to be.
Oh, really? Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little bit early to ask you this question then, but would you want your child to go into the trade, to follow you into the trade? Or would you want them to do white-collar work?
I wouldn't have a problem with them doing
You haven't bitten my arm off, have you?
No, because it's very hard graft. I mean, I know by the time I'm 55, 60 that I'm probably going to be falling apart.
Yeah.
I know that, I purposely take out private medical cover.
Right.
Just in case.
Yes.
Because of all of the other things that are going on in the NHS at the moment. But it is realistically going to the gym for 8 hours a day flat out.
Yeah. And I mean, it is impossible to exaggerate that. And the toll, as you say, that it would take, no matter how fit you are, you are battering yourself on a regular basis. And that's part of the issue. So I guess that we've got such a backwards attitude, such that the conversation about immigration in this country has been so corrupted now for so long that we ignore some basic truths about human movement. When our economy was in trouble and Germany was booming, an awful lot of people like Ryan would go to Germany to work on the sites there. It's that program, Auf Wiedersehen Pet. It's as if the tides come up and down in different territories, and if you've got a form of free movement of labour, then the work will go where the work is needed. But we've shut that door now. Essentially, we've shut that door, albeit that we've put up the shortage occupation list. We've told people to clear off. They're less likely to come back when we beg them to. Steve's in Cardiff. Steve, what would you like to say?
How's it going? Long-time listener, first-time caller, all that nonsense?
Well, it's not nonsense, Steve. How dare you? It's a crucial part of the bonhomie and banter that we share together every day. What can you tell me, mate?
Well, I'm a 30-year-old carpenter from Cardiff. Just a bit of an insight, really.
Yes.
As a young carpenter in the game. I currently work on all the new builds around South Wales, even so far up to Chepstow and sometimes Bristol. When I was an apprentice, when I was 16, 17, straight from school, the governments used to give a scheme out where they'd pay your employer a certain amount, and then obviously they'd pay you a little bit every week then to, keep you going, keep your interest in, so you could start building up your tools.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, then after the 2-3 years, however long your course takes, it's generally 3 years before your college and stuff, you're clued up and you've got enough money behind you, hopefully, because you assume you're going to be living with mum and dad around that age.
Yes, of course. To strike out on your own.
Yes, you can start buying your tools then over the years. But what happened with me was I qualified, and the money that I was getting, it was only £130 a week. But when you're young, you're drinking, you spend it on the weekend and stuff. So
yes, of course.
I ended up going to Australia. But when I came back a couple of years later with some money behind me and then jumped back into the trade full pelt, the schemes were all gone. And I don't know if that's a Wales problem compared to an England problem, but
unlikely.
Any people now who want to bring an apprentice into the trades, they have to pay for them themselves.
So you were at college?
I was at college, yeah.
Getting a few 130 quid a week from the government?
But to work on site. So I was on site first year, I was in college full time.
So it was probably mixed. It was probably subsidised for the people you were working for were getting some money from the government and some of the money coming from, they'd be paying you themselves. But that makes perfect sense because it's good for society to train on people like you. So you were the final generation, really.
I was, without being too dramatic, I think I was the final generation where the government assisted in that. And obviously since Brexit and everything, I'm just looking around the building sites. I'm a young 30, and there's no young people anymore. If someone wants an apprentice, they have to pay them out with their own wages. And when you made the comment earlier about certain parts of the UK where wages may be creeping up now due to the foreign labour leaving, that's not the case.
No.
Like silly things like, I was in a house the other day, I do the second fix, so I do all your doors, skirting, architraves, stair parts, all the internal carpentry,
Yes.
There was a plumber there. He was waiting for his china from Italy for 6 weeks.
Oh, Lord, yeah, of course.
So it's little things, So wages might be going up at some places, but then the wages around Wales, for instance, they're not rising to the point where people told you they would. They're not terrible, but they're not great. But being self-employed then, you've got to then take the risk on having a young person who might not be interested, and then if they are interested, that's a plus. But if they're not, you've wasted your time on them.
Yeah, and they might not stay with you even if they are interested. So so there's no light at the end of the tunnel as far as I can see, Steve.
No, and as a 30-year-old, I have these conversations with my family all the time, and it's quite disheartening really, because you do get some young kids, and you'll see them for 6 months and then they'll just be gone then. And
why
then,
is that? Why is that? What is it? Is it the physical side of it that gets to them? Because the money's good.
No, to be honest, well, even when I was in school, there wasn't a big push towards construction. I was just one of those practical kids where
you just fancied it.
I left school with a couple of GCSEs, and I said to my dad, I always wanted to do something with design technology, and just practical wise. And he took me down to the college, and the carpentry corridor was looking a bit long, so I thought, screw this, I'm going to go to the bricklaying. And he looked at me and he said, bricklaying, do you want to be outside in the rain every day? And you know what I mean? And the penny dropped then. I thought, no, I'll wait in the queue to be a carpenter.
Top dadding that. I like that. And what did you get him for Father's Day?
Oh, so the post is coming tomorrow.
Yeah, well, I hope so, because he deserves something. He set you on the right course there. Are you a dad? Are you a dad yourself?
No, I'm not yet, no.
Well, I'll ask you that question theoretically then. Would you want your child to follow you into this trade?
I would, but I'd have him working for me. I wouldn't put him through, even though I'm not going to name names. I just left him in January, but I did work for one of the biggest firms in South Wales, and even the way they look after you, they don't make it enticing enough for young kids anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even though they're desperate for staff, they've got the culture wrong when it comes to actually sort of keeping you. And also, I presume, thinking of your dad's advice, that you being indoors is relevant as well. If you were up on a roof all day, it would be a very different life from the one that you lead at the moment.
Oh, it's lovely. I've got first carpenter friends on site, work colleagues, and every Monday they're out on site, on the roof in the rain, and I'm walking into my little cosy house to swing doors, and you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
There's not enough incentive for young kids anymore, and kids are willing. I don't think we give them enough credit. Kids are willing, but the money's not there. All of a sudden,
to train them up, and of course, they'll pay for themselves once they start earning a good crust as skilled labour. They'll be paying the taxes that will sort out the next generation. But it's again the short-termism coupled with the fact that you can't fix a problem if you're denying that it exists. So there may be a change when Labour get in, if Labour get in, because they're going to have to start pointing out all the problems that Brexit has caused or contributed to. Whereas the current lot have to keep insisting that there aren't any problems at all. Steve, what a great debut, mate. I look forward to your next call. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
We should do some unhinged headlines, shouldn't we? The problem is we haven't done smear Keir for ages because they've nicked it now. As we talked about in the first hour, the government seems set to actually... I've got quite a few unhinged headlines. Can we prepare the unhinged headline sting, please, Adam? I'm spoiled for choice. I had no idea there were so many. 12:34 is the time. What is the reason for these enormous shortages in the building trade? And, you can't have this conversation without mentioning Brexit. And there's a little bit of Schadenfreude. I think, under my glorious rule, the first thing Keir Starmer should do if he wins the general election is issue documentation based on how you voted in the 2016 referendum, because I think it's outrageous that I have to wait as long as you do for builders. If you voted for Brexit, you should be at the back of the queue, shouldn't you? You literally voted for this. Everyone else warned you what was going to happen, and you sort of stuck your fingers in your ears and shouted Project Fear. So I don't think that Remain voters should have to wait for as long as Leave voters for tradespeople to come and do the job. Because the reason why the waiting lists are so long, the reason why the waits are so long is entirely because of your vote in 2016 and the fibs that you believed. Now, I can leaven that slightly with a celebration, if you like, that some people have seen their wages go up. But my goodness me, look at what's happened to materials. So from a customer's point of view, it's a double whammy. Got to pay more for the work, wait longer for it, and the materials, partly for other reasons, but also partly because of becoming the first population in the history of humanity to vote to impose economic sanctions on itself. You've hurt the rest of us as well. 12:36 is the time. Is there anything we can actually do about it? Liam is in Bristol. Liam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
I'm a bricklayer. I've been working as a bricklayer for about 22 years.
Yeah.
When I first started, the average bricklayer that I was working with was on £180 a day. And now the average bricklayer in my area is now £200 a day.
Oh.
So it's gone up 20 quid in about 20 years.
How come?
I have no idea. But
it's a shortage occupation list now. So they're having to beg people to come here to do bricklaying, and yet the wages that you're getting haven't moved at all in 20 years.
James, I also take on a lot of apprentices. I've had probably over the last 10 years, I've had about 15 apprentices, and when they leave college, the quality of their training, they can barely lay a brick after 2 years.
Why is that? Why do we think that is? I don't doubt you, but why do we think that?
I have no idea. I think the quality of the training is just not up to standard.
But it was better when you... But your training was good.
Our training was good. Yeah. I had an old school apprenticeship for an Irish firm, and they taught me in a slightly different way, really, if I'm honest.
No, all right. Yeah, I think I understand, but we don't need the grisly details. So I've got a nephew who was thinking about training as a bricklayer, and you're suggesting that if he'd gone, he did carpentry in the end, but if he'd gone down the bricklaying course, he might not have got the grounding that he'd need to be of any use to you when he came out the other end.
Absolutely, yeah. Unfortunately so.
I'm worried about the noises in the background. I think I've got to leave it there because it sounds very, very noisy. But I don't. I mean, that's so many different answers to this question. Susan says it's all of the reasons you've mentioned, James. It's really hard work, the weather, and there is snobbery. And Keir Starmer has actually addressed this when said that the skills in working class jobs are not appreciated, but it is well paid. If you think the snobbery is exaggerated, look at the reaction he gets when he tells you that his dad was a toolmaker. Look at all the people who went to schools like mine, but ended up on the right wing of British politics, queuing up to mock him or to take the mickey out of him. He's proud of the fact that his dad was a toolmaker, I think, and wants to live in a country where those sort of skills are more respected. I don't know, I could be wrong. 12:38 is the time. Chris is in Lincoln. Chris, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Second time I'm talking to you. You've got a load of issues coming in with why kids are not going into these things. I taught maths for 20-odd years and got made redundant 6 years ago.
Okay.
And at the age of 11, you can see kids coming into secondary schools who are not the academic kids we want to go to GCSEs, going to do A-levels. But at the age of 14, you give them a good basic grounding from age of 11 to 14. 14, get them on a really serious and useful vocational pathway. Give these kids who've got the practical skills but haven't got the academic, they don't want to be sat there in a classroom, get them out there learning trades. Get them out there. They can see the money coming in.
At what age? What age would we do this?
I'd say at 14.
It's a bit young at 14. You can't put all your eggs in one basket at 14.
No. But you can still give them they can still stick with the maths and the English GCSEs, give them that thing. But at the age of 14, these are the kids, as Simon from Cardiff has said, he wants to go and start doing project design and so forth.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids are not going to pass many GCSEs. And if they do, they go to college. And to get onto the bricklaying, the electrical engineering courses or the apprenticeships, they need to get the grade 4 and 5 at GCSE. And these kids may not be getting those grades.
No, you're making sense, which means it almost certainly would never happen. But just respond to this from Keith. He says, "Oh, okay, fancy a job with zero security, no holiday pay, no sick leave, physically demanding. Great, join the building trade. I've got 3 sons, James. None of them are in the trade, thank goodness. I've been in it since 1976. I mean, part of the problem may be." At the other end of the telescope, so to speak, is that you've got a supply problem, but you've also got a desire problem. The young people may, to you and to me, look like they'd be perfectly suited to this line of work, but they just don't fancy it themselves.
A lot of the kids, they will fancy it, but the barriers are there to stop it. And once they get into it, as Keith was just saying, we need to have security. We need to put things in place for people who are doing the hard labouring jobs.
Yeah.
In the last 5 years since I started decorating and doing other things, shout out to great Gary Burton here, the physicality and what's happened to my body, I'm 53 now, it's horrible. I am getting back to a weekend and I'm knackered, but I've got to keep going. But it still beats being in the classroom.
Oh, you would say that, would you? Prefer it to your previous existence?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
That's horses for courses territory, isn't it? But
it is. And to answer your third question, I've got a 14-year-old son who's done his GCSE options.
Yeah.
He will never go into a classroom. He would consider joining me in doing kitchen spraying and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But he wants to be a vet because he's bright that way and he wants to do something with animals. So blessed cotton socks.
Yeah.
It is difficult.
But I think everyone thinks there is a cohort of young people who could, if we tweaked the system, being brought into these professions.
We've got to sweeten the offer. We've got to make it clear that, yes, it's hard, yes, it's physical, yes, there is massive money that can be made. But
well, you say that, but Liam, the bricklayer, a minute ago, has only gone, his day rate's only gone up by 20 quid in 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrible in areas, and you've got to go and specialise to be willing to move.
Right.
I'm sure if Liam went down the Venetian plastering or went down that route, so a bit more niche, he might be able to up it. When I started decorating, the day rate for painting, decorating is appalling around Lincolnshire. So I now spray kitchens, furniture in areas. I'm now
a little bit
more than
further
once as a manager.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, it's there. I didn't actually, while you were speaking, James has been in touch. The Building Engineering Services Association, he's part of their Future Leaders group, and they are addressing the skills shortages around schools and colleges to try and encourage people to do it. And that's interesting for parents then now. Thank you, Chris. You mentioned your 14-year-old. I mean, what would you rather your 14-year-old wanted to be? A vet or a roofer? A vet or a scout? I don't mean this in any way a judgmental way. I just think that most parents probably would fancy the professional, safe route of work. But by the time you get to 14 or 15, you have a clearer idea of what your child is going to be suited to. You're going to know by that age that there's no chance whatsoever of her ever becoming a GP. And so that again, do you know, so many of the conversations we have that are confusing when we're trying to unravel confusion come back to the same place. Because I'm now thinking about school nurses. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what are you talking about, James? You've gone absolutely doolally. Why are you thinking about school nurses? Because what Anne told us in the second hour about some of the reasons why teachers and people in schools are having to do things for poor children, deprived children that they didn't have to used to do. It's because they've got rid of some of the infrastructure. So you save a few quid today by getting rid of the school nurse. You pay thousands and thousands of pounds forever more to try and fill the gaps left by the school nurse. Careers in schools actually opening up doors that children would not otherwise have known existed, looking at the possibilities of apprenticeships, painting, decorating, but, you know, they're not being made aware of them. Michaela describes another problem about the requirements at GCSE level. You need English and maths. And her son just missed out on those because he has learning difficulties, but he really wanted to do an apprenticeship in a manual profession, but the route was barred to him. It's just not thoughtful. It's not thoughtful. Trades, I don't know whether Alison's picking me up or correcting me. I think trades are professions. I know they're not historically because it's manual versus white collar work, but I don't know that that's a helpful distinction anymore. It's coming up to 1:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Loads and loads of calls on this. I wasn't expecting that, actually. But well, anyway, I'll take a couple more of them after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:46 is the time. James, please don't read my name out. I'm trade adjacent. I measure new kitchens for premium worktops, granite, quartz, marble. There's about 1,200 of us in the country doing what I do. If you're good and you graft, it's a six-figure income. It's tough, but it's worth it. There's no course, no qualifications. It's experience only, but it's so niche I can't even find anyone to employ. Veronica writes, I have a wonderful builder who does great quality work, charges reasonable prices, and always prioritises regular clients. He's completely trustworthy. I can go away on holiday and leave him with the keys to the house. He's Polish, has lived in the UK for over 15 years, and is desperate to get new staff locally, but it's impossible. So now he wants to bring over skilled labour from Poland, but with no freedom of movement. That has become more difficult too. And also, you know, I think we forget the soft power. It's all very well saying, well, no, we've put skilled labourers on the shortage occupation list. But, you know, this is a country, this is post-Brexit Britain. This is the land that Nigel built. And people have received the message loud and clear that they're not wanted here. I mean, they are, by me, by Veronica, by you, but the public discourse has very much created an environment in which if you had the choice between coming here or going to Germany to ply your trade as a skilled Polish labourer, I don't think there'd be much competition. Adam's in Andover. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. All right.
All good, mate. What's on your mind?
I personally think it's down to parenting, and I count myself in that. I've worked in construction my whole life.
Yeah.
And kids nowadays, they want to do as little as possible, as much as possible, starting late and finishing early. And it's as simple as that. They're just not.
I got one off Peter. Peter said, I just asked my son if he wanted to be a vet or he'd rather be a vet or a carpenter. Yeah. And he said, I just want to be happy.
And it's a generalisation, but when I was younger, we were there in mass. And now they're just not. And my kids are exactly the same. And I do think it's down to us. I mean,
what do we mean? Because would you want? I mean, if you had a choice for your own child to go down a well-paid office job or to be breaking their back on a building site, I presume if you could just wave a magic wand and bring about one of those realities, you'd choose the first one.
I'm not sure. It depends.
Fair enough.
It's all on the individual, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm not saying that. I'm ignoring the individual. I've just given you a magic wand, Adam. So the individual doesn't matter. It's about what you would want in all things being equal. What would you rather they did?
You're probably right. I probably would veer him away from it. But when we were lucky enough that I earned enough money. I was a timber framer for over 20 years. I'm in sort of management now. But I worked in the wind, rain and shine, and I could work 8 days a week if I wanted to. Yeah. And it meant that my wife could stay at home. We brought our kids up. We paid a mortgage.
Well, you didn't do a very good job of it, did you, by your own account?
Yeah.
So what? I mean, I listen. There's definitely something in what you say, but I don't know how much of it is a kind of poor parenting and how much of it is a changing world. But what would you do differently? I mean, what if you wanted to have a child who was more likely to be like you were at 16? What would be different about their childhood from the one that they've actually had?
It would be more disciplined.
Okay.
James, I mean, when I did my apprenticeship, I went for my interview at 16, just out of school, in a suit and tie, and my dad was sat behind me in the interview.
Yeah.
And at 40 years old, my dad would ask me while I was having a day off work, and I got 2 grown-up kids. And I'd be like, mind your own business. But still, he was still challenging me for not being at work. And I don't think society is like that anymore.
No, and I mean, you describe it in quite warm terms. I mean, there'd be some people who think it's progress not to have society like that anymore. But that sense of necessity, I think we probably both had as young people. I've got to do something. What are my options? I don't get that bit now with some members of the younger generation. I don't know, what are they going to do? Stay at home forever, or just? I guess what we're describing, Adam and I couldn't wait to get to work. I could not wait to have money in my pocket, and maybe that is a parenting thing because we have generationally proved ourselves to be more likely to derive pleasure from subsidising our children. Certainly, feeling that they're getting things that we didn't have when we were children, and it may have done them some harm in a way, or done some of the things that Adam describes. James says, no, that's not James. I might get that one right. Lawrence says, I would rather sell myself on OnlyFans than break my back every day for nothing. I mean, it's a view. Joanne's in Basildon. Joanne, what would you like to say?
James, thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
I feel compelled to ring.
Yes.
There's a thing called local skills improvement plans that are across the country. There's 38 in England, and the point of those plans is to work very closely with education and employers to fix skill solutions, of which one of them is construction.
Right.
But it's a really so this is funded by the government, and all governments, all sides, will continue to fund this.
Yeah.
But the problem is really complex.
I'm sure.
When you think about skilled labour, training skilled labour, you've spoken today about those salaries being much higher, people earning more. So actually they don't want to come off the tools and maybe go into colleges to be able to teach those skills.
Oh, gosh.
And there is
a
huge skills shortage within colleges. So we need to create an ecosystem with large employers and small employers to be able to help that. And that's, funding will need to do that.
So when Liam complained about the college leavers on bricklaying not being fit for purpose, part of the reason for that is because people like Liam aren't going into the colleges to teach.
Absolutely.
Well,
100%.
Yeah.
And also, going back to the careers perspective, funding careers advice and guidance is quite expensive. So we are reliant on employers coming in to schools and colleges to be able to demonstrate what a career looks like within that industry. But because we are made up of mainly SMEs in the UK,
yes,
they're already saying, you've already heard today, that actually we've got jobs built for, next year and beyond. So they don't have the time.
I can't come into school to do that.
Absolutely.
Oh, this is, and that's what you do, is it? You're in that, on that side of things.
Yeah. So we create an ecosystem, we use that word a lot,
I like that
to be
word.
able to facilitate that activity. So employers that have got the time to be able to go into schools and colleges to provide information, advice and guidance, and also to work with stakeholders to be able to fund people to come into education to make that transition from trade into, skilled teacher or tutor, whatever is needed.
And what reaction do you get? Do you see the moments on young faces where they suddenly realise there's a world ahead of them that they hadn't been aware of?
They can't be it.
You can't be what you can't see. That's exactly right.
Absolutely. And there are absolute gems of light bulb moments where individuals, whether it be young or old, conduct work experience and then they think that's exactly the career that I want. And whether that's inside construction or external construction, it happens. But it absolutely is incumbent on us all to work within the system to be able to fix the problem.
That's fascinating.
It's a really interesting job to do.
There's so much to it. What's the name of the scheme again, Joanne?
Local skills improvement plans. There's 38 across the country, England.
Yeah.
So any employer that is really struggling for shortages, get them to look at their local skills improvement plan and the contacts within it, and they may be able to work with their colleges or providers in a much more close way to be able to fix some of the problems that they're experiencing.
Thank you, Joanne. There are subjects sometimes that you think are quite straightforward, but the more you talk about them, the more you realise how complicated they are. And that's a really good example of this. But that's quite uplifting. I'm more optimistic now, having heard that. Just need to find a way of connecting the two cogs, the profession or the trade and the youngsters. They fit together, but at the moment they're miles apart, and people like Joanna are bringing them closer and closer. Vadia is in Bury. Vadia, what would you like to say?
Oh, hiya, James. Thanks
Hello.
for having me on. So I work for Connections, which is connected to the council. So I work with young people.
Right.
I've only been in this job a few months, and I was a TA, so I can agree with what the teachers say as well as regards to spending money on children. But what I'm coming across now working with teenagers is the problem is there's a lack of resources, there's a lack of courses, because they need people that have worked in the trade to become tutors, and the wages are much below what they do. So we have a cycle of problems, and the GCSEs, and I know of a young boy who's been taken off a building course because he wasn't attending his English to resit his GCSEs. So we've got so many potential young people.
That's just a silly prescription, isn't it? That's just silly, because his ability to do the construction course has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not he's got an English GCSE. I can see where it came from as a plan, but you should have a bit of freedom.
It's not working.
Exactly.
We have so many young people. And my own son, he's applied to I want him to do a trade, to be an electrician.
Oh, yeah.
But the pressure on him now to get he's just done his GCSEs, and we're praying that he doesn't have to reset.
Well, no, but you've worried me now. I think, because I'm thinking if I've got an electrician coming around my house, I'd quite like him to have a few GCSEs.
No, they do, but what I'm saying is, so if you can't write about Macbeth, in your English.
All right, well, the English one doesn't matter, but I'd want him to have maths, I think, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
You've got to be good with numbers before you come around and putting in plugs in my kitchen.
But if you want a plasterer or a painter, they are restricted because they have to get.
That's a really good point.
They might be great at history.
I love that line. He's coming round to fix my toilet. He doesn't need to know about Macbeth. And I don't mean that in a snobby way. I mean that it cuts both ways as well, doesn't it? You wouldn't need.
No, I don't, because that's what they're doing in literature. He's just done his GCSEs. So really, I'm like, well, I want him to know about Macbeth. That's great, but I don't want it to hinder him.
It shouldn't be holding him back from learning how to be an electrician. So again, as with the last lady, you paint a picture where I can see the two cogs. It's just a question of how we get them to bite each other, isn't it? How you get to close the gap between.
Well, I come from a family of traders, so the men in my family were, of builders, plasterers, tilers, and they're just, working class men that work really hard and have got a trade, but he wasn't put on the same restrictions that the young people are today.
That's interesting.
And
made it.
Them,
So. We should be trying to make it easier, make the passage easier rather than necessarily. What a brilliant selection of calls. Thank you, Vadir. Thank you, everyone, on that one. It's been an education. If you missed any of it, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store, or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Sawbrick will be with you at 4, but now on LBC, it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.